Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council regular meeting for Monday, August 1st. We have two study session items to kick off the night, and we're a little bit behind time, about 10 minutes or so. But first up is Chair Bill Lesage, Vice Chair Josh Newell, and members of the Budget Advisory Committee to present a review of their 2022 Budget Advisory Committee annual report. So good evening, Chair Lesage. I'm not sure if actually, I think we were going to make room for them up front, if that's correct. Is that correct, City Clerk?
Point of order, Mayor. I do think that there's perhaps a typo on the agenda. I believe Mr. Newell is the chair.
I kind of wondered that. I was kind of curious about that. So
that's new as of last meeting.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh,
We can
okay.
get an update then.
I was the chair for the last cycle. Bill was the chair moving forward.
I did see it in the contents. I wasn't sure if it was a correction or not. But so Chair Lesage, I'll let you kick off the meeting. But good evening.
All right. Good evening, Council. City Manager Lewis. So with me today is Josh Newell and Min Kyu. Everybody else was either going to join in remotely or couldn't make it today. So we want to thank you for allowing the BAC to be here tonight to provide a citizens-based viewpoint on the 2023 budget. The BAC welcomed several new members. Josh became chair, as we just were speaking about, as Chelsea was moved to the council, and has done a great job at helping us navigate through our format and structural changes, and I look forward to his guidance as I move into the chair role. The committee also welcomed several new members, including myself, over the past year, and appreciate all the inputs and perspectives. This year, the BAC restructured the meeting schedule to align with the strategic plan outcomes, which we found provided more insight into the needs of the department. And we're also thankful for the opportunity to have participated in the capital improvement project process, and Josh is going to talk more about that tonight. Both of those items were two big changes from a committee perspective. With that, we'll start tonight's presentation with community outreach and engagement. We heard positive feedback from the departments regarding the impact of increased outreach to our community. It became apparent from the conversations how interwoven the outreach is amongst the city departments and the need for that. We heard it fairly consistently, and their needs to connect to the community, and they really see it growing over time. The BAC applauds the outreach methods. There are several of them, but to mention a few that came up, and we even had internal discussions around surveys and the value of those, obviously social media, flyers, events, and we encourage the council to continue to invest in these activities. We feel those that are informed and educated are able to self-help and less likely to reach out to the city for support, either a phone call or email or even potentially coming in. Communication did see a need for a headcount to help manage the requests, which we see value in, but we also understand the resource needs across the city. We asked the council to keep in mind that a positive employee experience, in this case how the requests are ran, getting responses back from the community team, results in a positive experience for our citizens who are also customers in many cases. We encourage the city to explore opportunities with the Englewood schools to assist with the increased demand for content creation, leveraging student communication and marketing activities with partnerships within the city may provide both benefit to the city and the schools. And the thought process there is it may help it's hard to keep up with creating the content that they need to. So the thought is there, maybe you could leverage your students in high school or middle school to even assist with that, and they would learn something along the way, or volunteers hours potentially. We did proactively reach out to Wendy Rubin just to kind of float that idea. Haven't heard back, but that was just a recent reach out. So if we hear back, and we will follow up, we'll share it internally within the BAC and then with our council liaisons. Overall, the BAC finds tremendous value in promoting Englewood's story and hope the city continues to prioritize the need. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh.
Awesome. Thank you all. As Bill mentioned, this was the first year that the BAC had a recommendation oversight on the capital projects process. So we're hoping having some new eyes on the process as a whole, as well as our experience with the recommendations this year, we can provide some new insight to council to help manage it moving forward, because it seems to be a very difficult process to be managed every single year. Anytime you've got more requests, tier 1 requests than the budget allows, we found ourselves at making some really difficult conversations about what quality program, what quality need needs to be slimmed back or cut from the approach. And this isn't a year that we had higher than average revenues to be, or higher than average fund balances to be able to allocate towards these needs. So with that, we tried to focus on what we saw very, very important: matching grant opportunities, ADA inclusivity, and you'll see that through our recommendations. But talking a little bit about the process itself, as we went through it, we found a lot of questions. First and foremost is when we received the list, we had no idea the context to last year and next year around the list. What were new projects to be considered? What were ongoing programs that are already being funded? What are things that we're offering matching grant opportunities or other alternative funding sources? Everything was just compiled in this single list, and it was through a lot of extra conversation and some great work with Jenny and Jackie and the finance team that supports the Budget Advisory Committee that got us to those answers. But what we'd love to see moving forward is more of an approach similar to what Public Works is doing. Classifying these things. This is an ongoing project. This has been previously funded at this level. This is our future funding concerns. On some of the projects, for example, we didn't know how we would be able to cover next year's bill, especially on some of those larger projects that have a upfront cost and then maybe a $5 to $10 million fee expected budget for the next few years, when we're only expecting a capital projects fund that could be less than that. There is no way in good conscience we can say yes to those to fund it today without knowing what that cost of completion is and not having that long-term approach. So thinking about how to incorporate those costs of completions, and even on that, knowing it's a limited budget, do we put a cap on the size of the project to be considered outside of the capital projects process? So I think a great example is fiber. It sounds like fiber is asked for every single year by IT. There's some huge potential benefits, but at $1 million cost each year, that takes away from other opportunities and other projects. So how do these projects now get addressed, right? By identifying which ones are going to be too much to put inside the capital projects process, by understanding what ongoing funding we need to preserve and keep for the investments that we've made in the past, we can start to identify which projects are important enough to encourage city to start looking for alternative funding sources for. Right? I think a great example of success that has kind of been incorporated is thinking about the pavement maintenance fund. By sending that to a ballot to get understanding of citizens of the challenges of just keeping our roads up to par inside of our current budget capacities, that's going to remove a huge chunk to be able to fund other capital projects moving forward. Thinking about it from that aspect, so thinking about things that we'd love to see more on this as well, in addition to cost of completion, is a better understanding of the ROI on some of these large projects. Things like, what are our risks if we don't do it? What are the benefits if we do it? What is the impact of the citizens? So as we get these larger projects, we can understand cost of completion, make sure that they're being done. I think, Mayor Pro Tem Ward, we talked about a couple projects from your experience on back that kept getting punted year after year. And now we have these bridge issues that we need to address. But the question is, how do we find the funding? We want to prevent these situations moving forward. So those were some of our experience through the capital projects process. We're looking forward to see how it integrates with our ongoing conversations around the strategic outcomes over the next year, and hope to be able to provide some more insight and some potential process improvements to that. So another area we would like to call out, public safety and police funding is always going to be a concern in any communities, and especially with the political environment, recent events here in the city, understanding the balance of the right approaches. We talked a lot about this as a committee. We don't feel there's a one-size-fits-all approach that should be taken, and we really commend the city for incorporating that over the past few years. One of the challenges of that is all the funding for alternative policing, diversion programs, and some of that has come from the current police budget. That's why we support the ballot measure to get that its own dedicated funding, but it's important to look at these as you're communicating with citizens as a combined approach, right? Rather than having a this or that, where it can become adversarial. One of the massive benefits of direct funding these alternative and diversion programs is the fact it relieves funding for the police officers. We can make sure that they have the support they need to go out and focus on the issues that they're uniquely qualified to focus on. So having that combined message around its public safety in all of its different forms as a part of this funding for it, we'd really encourage that as consideration for messaging any support for the ballot measures. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Min Q, who's going to talk a little bit about grant writing and some of the other areas that we have major recommendations on.
Yep, this is working. Cool, okay. Thanks, Josh. So one of the items on the list was Parks and Rec bond issuance. The BAC recognizes that there's aging infrastructure in parks, rec centers, library, golf. And so with that said, it diminishes safety, accessibility, aesthetic quality to the visitors, whether that be citizens and non-citizens here. And so one of the things that we wanted to bring up is Pirates Cove. With Pirates Cove, that generates substantial revenue to PRLG each year. The BAC feels that the funding improvements to Pirates Cove is not only essential to the water park, but to all PRLG facilities. And additionally, maintaining and improving park infrastructure is a means to provide quality recreation to the members of the community who depend on low or no cost access to the recreation. And for reasons stated there, the BAC supports the 2023 bond initiative to fund improvements to aging infrastructure in our parks at the Englewood and Maui Recreation Centers and at Pirates Cove. Next on the list is the support for grant writing. Similar to the 2021 annual report that the BAC presented to the City Council, the BAC has heard from several departments the need for assistance with pursuing grant funding, as well as grant writing assistance. And so with that said, the BAC encourages the city to employ or contract with a grant manager to be assigned to the city manager's office at a minimum of 1.0 FTE. And this position, maybe a generalist position, the benefits of having a grant writer, is one, to seek funding announcements, second, to coordinate all phases of the grant application from letter of intent to submission, and the list goes on. And so the BAC feels strongly that the city and the council look into that. And then moving into the next item is the topic of recruitment and retention. Throughout the year, the common theme at each of the BAC meeting where our committee asked department directors, what challenges does your department face with respect to budget? And overwhelmingly, they all said to the extent of recruitment and retention. So, and obviously with the current economic situation, every company, organization is facing this staffing shortages. And with staffing shortages, one of the prime example here in the city of Englewood is the Pirates Cove has to shut down on Mondays. And so with that said, that's substantial revenue loss to the city, and we want to make sure that the city is well funded enough to keep good quality employees and hire really good employees in the future as well. And with that said, I will pass it over to Bill.
Thanks, McHugh. All right, so we'd like to wrap up tonight with both recognition and closing statements. So from a recognition perspective, it's not only the thanking and appreciating the process that we went through this past year, but also programs and actions we've seen taken by the city, some of which were a result or was related to BAC suggestions in the past. So to our communications department for coordinating neighborhood nights, offering the party trailer, backyard movie kicks, the improvement grants, we thank you. We see tremendous value in that and hope that the council continues to fund those types of items. To the Council and Public Works Department for issuing RFPs for the single hauler waste service. We appreciate the council went through the due diligence and the level of engagement that it had with the city. We are thankful for that. To the city manager's office and finance for inviting boards and commissions to advise budget development for capital improvement projects, and I'll add to that to inviting us to the meeting. I think that was a first for the boards and commissions, and we all found that extremely valuable. and had further appreciation for the long nights that you all put in. To Assistant City Manager Tim Dodd, really thank you for working through with us and the city staff on encouraging the back to realign our meetings to support the structure of the strategic vision, so restructure our meetings and approach, and then really worked with the staff to make all that happen. So we're thankful, we appreciated that, and we found it to work. And then to the City Manager's Office and the DEI Committee for continued investment in diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So we hope you found tonight's review beneficial. We feel that in summary, the council should approve a budget that will foster recruitment and retention efforts in departments that are experiencing staffing constraints, prioritize capital improvement projections that improve infrastructure, public safety, and accessibility, categorize the capital improvement projects as either studies, projects, or programs, and provide a cost to completion for each line item, and some departments are already doing so. Approve projects which are funded by grants or under matching programs and highlighting those. Consider ballot measures which support major funding needs, including pavement maintenance, parks and rec, and public safety. We really saw the ballot measures as a tool that could be, as a lever that probably hasn't been used as much in the past. So the BAC was happy to see that in the discussion. We thank you again for your time tonight and look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chair Lesage, Vice Chair Newell, and Mr. Minku Jean for presenting tonight and the fine work that committee continues to do. I really, really appreciate it. Any questions from council for the BAC? Member Newnham.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Jean, Mr. Lesage, Mr. Newell, it's so good to see you again. Thank you so much for a really excellent report and a really fantastic readout. It's wonderful to see the work of this committee. And I'm thrilled to hear that the new format worked well for you. A little bit jealous that I didn't get to participate in it, but really grateful for all of the hard work that this committee does. I do have a couple of questions and a couple of thoughts after reading your report. I particularly appreciate the thoughtful analysis of your involvement in the capital improvement plan this year. I think you've given us some really thoughtful recommendations as you've absorbed this information for the first time as a committee, and it's very in line with some of the questions that I also have and some of the things that I'd like to see us develop in a more strategic approach to long-term infrastructure funding and planning for the city. So I really appreciate your time there. I also really appreciate your work talking about communications in the city. How do we continue to build some of that social infrastructure for how we talk about what Englewood is, who we are, the story we're inviting folks into, and then how do we let them know about the opportunities that we have to engage? I'd be so curious, in your conversation around that, did you have any ideas about additional things that the city could do or additional investments we could make? I know you mentioned the FTE, but are there any other tactics that you would recommend to us for how we can reach citizens with what the city's doing for them?
I don't think we had any recommendations on any new activities or outreach programs. We really felt it as a continuation, and that the department's done such a great job at what they have developed, kind of that ongoing development there, but no specific recommendations that I recall.
Yeah, I think this calls out lots of areas of success. We talked specifically about the flyers that have been left on our doors about the street sweeping and moving the cars, the surveys that went out via text message and the inclusion there, in addition to all the great nights. I know I personally follow the social media channels on Instagram and Facebook, and getting, I'm even thinking back to some of the videos about the alley paving and the views of the alley and the benefits there. And so I think continuing down the multi-channel approach from the digital aspect, complementing it with the paper where needed and appropriate, especially getting those important action steps, like your car might get towed if you don't move it, is a really important thing to not leave on social media, but take to the door of the residents, as well as the great community events. My neighbors hosted a block party, so I got to experience the trailer by walking out the street and had a fantastic experience there. So seeing those events continue, we think it's a really successful thing where more continued focus and emphasis and growth in those from the team currently doing it is probably the right path forward.
It's very helpful. Thank you guys so much.
Any other questions from council? Member Anderson.
I actually don't really have a question, but did want to make a couple of comments, especially with your involvement, seeing the numbers that you guys came up as we were working through our capital improvement plan. That was just really helpful, and hearing in your report kind of how you were making those decisions and some of the questions you're asking were helpful to me too, to know, oh yeah, which ones of these I'm not always 100% sure which ones have been funded in the past or continuations of previous projects and those kind of things. So I would really like to see that particular recommendation get implemented in the future, is just maybe a brief description under each of those as to what the history of the project and those kind of things are. But found your report really helpful, and thank you for all the work you've done on the budget as well.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Woodward.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I really appreciate that. There's a lot of good information in here, and there's a couple things that I wanted to address. One specifically, you had recommended the multi-city Broadway corridor study in working more with our neighbors, and I believe that is already done, or has been done for years through Dr. Cog. That's one of the reasons you can drive out of Denver from Colfax and go south and almost get to Highlands Ranch without hitting a red light, if you're lucky. But that's part of what Dr. Cog does, is through the Regional Council of Governments. So I think that is addressed, and I know we work with Littleton and Sheridan all the time on different stuff, and Denver to some degree. The idea of you being involved with the capital projects process, having been on council at the time that your board was implemented, I'm surprised it wasn't there. And it may have been because it was brand new, but I would agree. I think you should be on, taking a look at that and going with feedback on it. Also, with the Pirates Cove, as I'm sure you're aware, Pirates Cove was through a recreational bond issue back in 2001, I believe, or two, and is paid off next year. So a lot of the funds that comes out of Pirates Cove go to funding Pirates Cove and paying that bond. So, in those, I appreciate your report. It's really well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem.
I've really participated or enjoyed participating in and watching the process alongside you guys. This is definitely a different budget advisory committee than the one I sat on for 7 or 8 years. Your notes in particular on the capital improvements were very helpful. Just for council's discussion, even while you were working on this report, noting that when we fund something this year, we need to be aware of how we're going to fund it in subsequent years and how we're going to maintain it once it's completed, was really helpful in sort of developing a better understanding of where we prioritize our capital dollars. So I wanted to let you know how much I appreciate that feedback in particular, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the next cycle as well.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Member Russell.
Thank you. And I would like to thank you for the report, and I enjoy sitting on that committee, and I have seen really the genesis of that committee since it first started, and it's grown tremendously every year. And I do appreciate the discussion this year because it did help me as well when we were discussing capital projects and looking at them a different way. And the report was incredibly well done, and I think will be very helpful going forward, so that perhaps the process next year, it will help city staff also give us the information we need to get the conclusions that we need to come to. So I appreciate all that you do, and it's been my pleasure to be a liaison to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. With no further questions, members of the BAC, thank you again for all your work on this. I greatly appreciate just all the work that you put into this. It also feels good that you also back us in the ballot measures that we approved last week for the alternative policing methods, providing a dedicated funding source for that, as well as the payment as well. So two things that council approved last week to be on the ballot for this November. But again, thank you very much for everything that you've done, and yeah, look forward to continuing to work with you guys in the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Moving on to the next agenda item, I think we may be right back on time, so we may be able to start the meeting here at 7 o'clock. But Director of Finance Jackie Loh is here to present proposed financial policy revisions in place. Good evening, Director Loh.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. In March 2016, City Council approved Resolution number 51, adopting this Englewood financial policies. And tonight, we're going to review the resolution outlining the following two financial policy revisions. One is investment policy. The other is general fund balance policy. Kevin Engel, Finance Manager for the city, and Mary Donovan, Senior Portfolio Manager with the city's investment advisory firm, Insight Investment, are present tonight to discuss and answer any questions you might have to the proposed investment policy changes.
Thank you, Director Loh. Evening, Mayor and Council. We've recently completed a review of our general investment policy, and we've identified a few changes that we'd like you to consider. First is just administrative. We're changing the title for the Director of Finance. That's mentioned in several places in the policy. Also, there's some language in the policy that references the city's pension plans, which are not covered by this policy. So we're recommending removing that language. And that language is also in municipal code. So in a couple of slides here, you'll see the recommended changes to the code as well. Another change we're recommending is to lower the minimum rating that we're allowed to invest for corporate bonds and bank securities. And we're proposing to lower that from AA- to single A-. And that'll allow us for some better diversification within the portfolio and potentially higher yields. This next section, we're just standardizing the maximum allowable allocation within the portfolio for these various types of investments. We're setting that maximum at 30%. You can see a couple of them were just a little bit different than 30%. So those are the changes to the policy that we're recommending. This is the change to the municipal code. You see they're striking the language for the pension plans. We're also proposing to remove the yearly requirement to come to council with a resolution. And that's because this policy does not change on a yearly basis. Generally, every 4 or 5 years, we would come back with a change for you. So before we turn it back over to Director Loh for the fund balance discussion, we'd like to see if you have any questions for me or the investment advisor.
Members of council, do you have any questions for Mr. Ingles? Member Woodward.
Yeah, Mr. Ingles, I'm just out of curiosity. Our certificates of deposit, do we even remotely have close to 50%?
In my 20 years of doing this, we've never owned a certificate of deposit.
Okay.
It's the insurance behind those is so limited dollar amount that doesn't make sense for the size of our portfolio.
For the size of the portfolio, it's
Exactly.
$250,000 FDIC is not going to cut it. That really answers my question right there, so thank you.
Sure.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Regarding the rating change, is there substantial risk to purchasing bonds that have a one-letter difference in their risk rating?
I'm going to ask Mary to come up and answer that. She's our expert.
Thank thank you for the chance to talk to you tonight about the investment policy updates. With respect to the additional risk, it's very limited. We were looking at a Moody's Investor Service report about cumulative default rates for securities that are rated AA3, which was the bottom of the range that we were authorized to invest in at this time, and it's 0.16%. 0.16%, okay? Bringing that range down to the single A increases that marginally to 0.37%. So, I mean, it is really low. You really start to see that ramp up the curve as you get out into the triple C and lower rated securities, but it's a marginal amount of additional risk for the benefits of increased diversification and potential incremental yield for the portfolio.
Any other questions, Mayor Protem? I guess I do have, just to piggyback on the change in the bond rating. Are there any other municipalities that are actually that have gone down to A- bond rating?
Yes, here in Colorado, we work with a couple of municipalities that have migrated to the single A credit rating. The city of Aurora moved that way last year, and the city of Golden has been allowing us to buy single A rated securities for many years for their portfolio. So the maturity limit that we're recommending is still that 3-year horizon as stipulated by state statute. That's an important control for the risk. And then we'll be very mindful of diversification. We have a 5% limit per name in the portfolio, but we're typically much lower than that, much more granular, 2%, 2.5% per issuer.
Thank you, Ms. Donovan. Any other questions from council before moving on? Member Woodward.
I do have a question. Do we have bond investments that are like a mutual fund or a mutual fund where there are numerous different types of funds within that?
The city does maintain exposure to local government investment pools as an investment vehicle that is similar to a money market mutual fund, but it is organized under a different state statute. And then also, actually, I'm gonna stop there. I think that the LGIP exposure is the closest comparison to a mutual fund. LGIP is more short-term, money market fund type structure.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions? Ms. Donovan, thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Ingles, are you going to continue with the reserve policy?
No, if there are no more questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Director Loh.
I see no further questions. Mr. Ingles, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, just one other thing. We are recommending an ordinance for the municipal code change and a resolution for the policy change.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ingles. Director Loh, our favorite topic.
Yeah, I'll continue the discussion about the fund balance policy update. In March 2022, staff reviewed the following with City Council. We review the fund balance policy in terms of targeted unrestricted reserve level based on historical data in the past 15 years, including changes fund balance. We're going to refer to this information in the next slide. We also provide council with the pros and cons of changing the current rate from 16.7% to a range. The 16.7% is recommended by GFOA, Government of Finance Officers Association. It's roughly 2 months. So we are going to recommend a different range as per the conversation from March. We also share with council the general fund reserve policy of surrounding jurisdictions, including State of Littleton, Denver, Greenwood Village, and Sheridan. You can see the March PowerPoint slides in the attachment. And so after March meeting, City Council direct staff to draft a resolution to revise the general fund's fund balance policy to incorporate the following: a sliding and ratcheting unrestricted reserve ranging from 12% to 21.4% based on operating revenues or expenditures, whichever is more predictable. So we are going to go through this revision with council. I want to refresh your memory. We'll review the general fund balance changes in the past 15 years, you can see in the past 15 years, we only tap into the unassigned fund balance or fund balance 4 times. In 2028, the city will encounter the global financial crisis. At that time, we tap into the fund balance. So I just want to also give council more information. Before I tap into the fund balance, it took the city approximately 4 years to bounce back from the financial challenges. And we had a hiring freeze. We had a furlough days during that 4 years. We also transferred funding from other funds such as employee benefits fund SERF before we tap into the unassigned fund balance. So I just want to bring additional information to council. Even we only tap into the unassigned fund balance in a small dollar amount, but the city did everything within its ability to preserve the fund balance. And here's a recommendation. In order to incorporate the sliding ratcheting policy, we need to make the following changes. We want to list of potential uses for the unrestricted reserve or unassigned fund balance. These recommendations are based on our past experience. For example, we could loan some unrestricted reserve or unassigned fund balance to an enterprise fund like we did with stormwater. We loaned stormwater $3 million with 1% interest rate, but they never tap into the loan. Or the city loaned $300,000 to DDA with interest, I think 1% interest rate with 7-year term, interest only with a balloon payment at the end of 7 years. So this is our experience using the unassigned fund balance. Another one that we've been doing is one-time operational requests, such as feasibility studies or pilot programs and projects. And also we have been, like in the past 2 years, transfer any unassigned fund balance to capital projects. Now we want to prioritize what's our philosophy and guiding principle to fund competing interests. The last one is just like what we did with 2022, the global financial crisis, and what's our plan to respond to the COVID pandemics. And also we need to think about any declared disasters like the fire in Superior. If that happened to City of Englewood, what's our response? So these are just recommendations for council's considerations. The next one is we're going to change the policy by incorporating the sliding ratcheting reserve range. The first one, we're going to take out 16.67%. We're going to set a range between 12% to 21.4%. When the unrestricted reserve may ratchet down to no lower than 12% when we have an operating deficit, which means expenditures exceeding revenues. When that happened, like we did in 2028 to 2011, we're going to do every effort to reduce the expenditures and to transfer fund if council desire. When we have operating revenue exceeding the expenditures, we could slide up the reserve to no higher than 21.4%. Then fund balance in excess of the unrestricted reserve and a restricted reserve such as Tabor emergency reserve can be used for any one-time operational capital request like we recommended in this slide. Here's a presentation to show council how this unrestricted reserve percentage will affect our unrestricted policy, and will this give council the flexibility and nimbleness to respond to any needs we have in the future. So you can see we use the 2021 audited fund balance composition, probably 17 million. We have 3 scenarios based on 16.7% to set the unrestricted reserve, or 12% as a floor, or 21.4% as a ceiling. Then we have to of the 17 million fund balance, we have to reserve 1.8 million for Tabor. And also ARPA, we talk about of the fund balance, 663,000 is reserved for ARPA. Actually, this number decreased 400,000 because last month we decided the $258,000 for cross-purpose, more for capital than general fund. So we decreased the balance. Then we have the long-term asset reserve committed by council internally, 94,000. Then you can see if we use 16.7, 12%, 21%, that's the reserve, unrestricted reserve we're going to have. And what does this mean to unassigned fund balance? So under the 16.7%, we will have 5 million unassigned fund balance. If we ratchet down, we'll have 7.7 million in unassigned fund balance. If we increase our unrestricted reserve, we'll have 2.5 million in unassigned fund balance. So this is just our discussion. Tonight we want to answer any council's questions, and August 15, we need council's vote through resolution to adopt these changes. Do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you, Director Loh. Any questions from council? Member Nunekamp.
Thank you for the presentation and for all the work that you've put into this concept over many months and a couple of years. I really appreciate it. I have a couple of questions regarding the process for how this would work. I'm looking at the actual language that would go into the resolution. For both points on slide, the general fund, yes, this one, sorry. Points C and D is that it may ratchet down or it may slide up. Can you walk us through the decision for that, how council would direct staff to do one or the other? If we were in a situation, I'm looking at the next slide, the discrepancy kind of the end that would be in excess between the 16.7 and the 21.4 is about almost $3 million. If council were to say, we would like to spend that on a capital project, we would like to stick at the 16.7, can you walk us through the process of how we would actually do something like this?
Okay, thank you. Let's take a look at this slide. Let's say if council determines use 21.4% to set an unrestricted reserve, that will leave the staff with 2.5 million. From our last conversation, council has reached a consensus. Seems like want to use 1 million out of 2.5 million to fund the capital, the gap. That will leave the staff with 1.5 million. What if we need a 1.5 million to fund some operating requests? And that will leave the council like no balance for any potential requests like inflation. We may say, hey, capital project increase, the price increase by 20%. Where does that funding will come from? So this is just something for council to consider if the percentage is reasonable.
So is your recommendation is the policy and practice that at one point during each budget process, council would direct staff, this is where we want it to be?
Yes.
Based on current economic conditions?
Yes, and the budget request. But the good news is we don't need to go all the way to 21.4 or all the way to 12. Council may choose 18% or 14%, depending upon the economic condition and our operating and capital needs.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. I just have one more question. On point E, it says that the excess may be used for one-time operational or capital amounts, as you just discussed. As we saw on your previous slide, the chart where the previous council did a large spend down of excess funds in the 2021 budget for capital projects, it's because that had grown in excess and that those taxpayer dollars were just sitting there, not being used for taxpayer purposes. Is there a conversation around under E, maybe a shall be used each year? They shall be used for something versus letting them sit? Or do you have a recommendation that may is more proper? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think the whole purpose is to give council more flexibility. I think that's the reason we are making the change. So I think either way, if will give council more flexibility, or give the staff the nimbleness to, more responsiveness to the marketplace, we can definitely consider those changes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Noonan-Camp. Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Loh. So according to this policy, we would make a determination on ratcheting and sliding based on our how we came out on our budget in the previous year. Is that correct?
Based on the actual audited financial information, if we have operating surplus, which means the revenue exceeding the expenditures, or deficit, if.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did we have that operating surplus then in 2021? Because that's what we would be looking at, is the year that's completed, to make the decision for expenditures the following year.
If you see operating surplus, yes, but we did transfer a lot from unassigned fund balance. You can see it looks like we had deficit, but it's because we transfer money from unassigned fund balance to
Into the
support
general
capital.
fund,
If you
right.
really look at our operations, yes, we did
Okay.
have operating surplus.
Okay, and so we're kind of using the operating surplus as a proxy for how the economy is doing, right? Is that,
Correct.
because we want to ratchet up when the economy is going well. And if the economy is going well, then theoretically we should have an operating surplus. And so if we're going to follow this policy as we do our budget for next year, we should be ratcheting up from, presumably from where we currently are, but we don't have any guidance as to how much we should or should not ratchet up. So if we went all the way up to 21.4, then we would only have that 2.5 million, and this is for the 2023 budget, right?
Correct.
And what is our current, or what was our, what percentage were we at the end of, in terms of our reserves at the end of 2021?
2022, you mean, this year?
Well, I guess a present number would be fine, yeah.
Yeah, last year's are 17 million. The ending balance, 2021 ending balance is the 2022 beginning balance.
Okay. So the 17 million, what percentage of operating?
It depends if we use 16.7% or 12, then you can see based on the last year's ending balance, this is a unassigned fund balance we would have.
Okay.
Did I answer? Yeah.
So Director Loh, just a point of information, it looks like it's 16.7% at that 17 million. Am I reading that correctly? We were at the 16.7% at the end of last budget cycle.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it?
So that doesn't sound.
Yeah, so the balance is the same. The question is, what percentage of the balance is available for us to spend? And you'll see that under unassigned fund balance, fourth line from the bottom.
Yeah.
Each scenario has been calculated there based upon the percentage that we intend to keep in reserve.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so all right, good question. Good, thank you for that clarification.
you-
So we would want to just decide, but I mean, theoretically in the future, we're kind of making this decision in the middle of the budget process after we finish. But for next year, what we really want to do is before we start talking about specific projects where we may be tempted to spend more than we should actually make a decision. We want to ratchet up because of how we ended last year. We want to ratchet up to 18% this next year or something like that. So, I mean, as I'm looking at this, I'm saying we should ratchet it up, ratchet up a little bit, but I don't feel compelled to go all the way to 21.4 particularly. But anyway, I'm just kind of thinking through this whole thing. But I guess I'll just weigh in as far as the policy. I really like this, so thanks for all the work on it.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Russell.
Thank you. So if we left the fund balance policy at 16.7%, I totally understand the Mayor Pro Tem's desire to be using it, but is there anything that would really limit us? If we have, like, it went up to 25%, is there anything limiting us from taking all of the money above the 16.7% and using them for capital projects. I mean, without ratcheting, we still could do the same thing, evaluate at the end of every year or the beginning of every year what we could use that money for without changing our policy at all.
Correct. That's why we list the recommendation. An equally important question is, what are we going to do with our unrestricted reserve and unassigned fund balance?
Right, and I do agree with that, but I am deeply concerned about ratcheting down and comparing with these other cities. I mean, their ratcheting is different, but at one point, Littleton had $28 million in reserve above everything they needed to use, and maybe 21 million now. They're all in a different financial place than we are right now. I really feel like 16.7% is great. I'm not sure that we need to leave it sit there for year after year when we have expenses we need to use. But I think it's a safeguard right now because I'm very concerned about what's going to happen. And dropping down below that 16.7% could be very dangerous at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Members of council, we're right at 7 o'clock right now. I'd like to, if there's further questions, that's great. I'd like to get started on the council meeting as soon as possible, though. So if you could also give direction for Director Loh, that would be great. Member Woodward.
Yeah, I guess my point is just one. I would like to be looking at it at the beginning of the year or during the budgeting process and have one of these types of numbers, 15% or whatever. And then after the CAFRA comes out, when we know the actual audited, the city manager, finance, everybody's already been going through all these numbers up until then we can make that determination in June as to what other items we want to go after.
Mm-hmm.
But me personally, I want to be as conservative as I can until I know exactly where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Woodward. So I guess in terms of direction for the director, I know you want to be more conservative in your numbers, but would you be okay with the ratcheting and sliding?
Ratcheting and sliding, yes, I was fine with that.
Okay. Thank you, Member Woodward. Mayor Pro Tem.
Just one brief note. Director Loh, this slide in particular is very helpful to me. It demonstrates in a friendly format the consequences of our actions. In my opinion, the purpose of ratcheting and sliding is that, to my knowledge, this council has never complied with the current 16.7% reserve requirement. We've always been above that number. So when we have a policy that says how far above or how far below the target we can go, we are informing our citizens of what we intend to do, and then we're executing on it, which is one of my goals as a member of this council. So I'm excited to see ratcheting and sliding come into place, and I think it'll be beneficial to our planning in the future.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Member Anderson, you've weighed in. I'm also in favor of the sliding and ratcheting that we're seeing here tonight, so I would be in favor of moving that forward for the 15th. Member Newnenkamp?
I'll weigh in. I'm also in favor of moving this forward. I hear Member Russell's thoughts and concerns, but also know that we can keep it at 16.7 within this policy, but it does provide us some more flexibility and, in my mind, a policy around taxpayer dollars that's really important to me for transparency and accountability to the citizens.
Thank you, Member Newnenkamp. If no further questions, Director Loh, I believe you may have the information that you need based on the presentation tonight.
Great,
So thank you very much. And members of council, I would like to call this meeting to order. We can take a break after public comment, but if no one has any objections to that, we'll go ahead and just move the meeting to call it order. And then next would be the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you can stand, please do so. Thank you, everyone. City Clerk, can you please take roll call?
Yes, good evening. Member Anderson,
Present?
Member Noonenkamp,
Present?
Member Russell,
Present.
Member Ward,
Present.
Member Woodward,
Present.
Member Wink,
Present.
Mayor Sierra.
Present.
All seven present.
Thank you, City Clerk. And now consideration of minutes from the previous session. Any changes to the minutes from the meeting on July 25th? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes from July 25th.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Can I get a second?
Second?
Thank you, Member Noonenkamp. Can we please vote? Uh-oh. I was too quick for you, City Clerk.
All right, Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Noonenkamp,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward,
Aye.
Member Wink,
Aye.
Member Woodward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you, City Clerk. And just for the record, City Clerk, was Member Anderson that moved and Member Noonenkamp that seconded. There's no appointments, communication, proclamations, or recognition for tonight. And now we move on to recognition of scheduled public comment. And I believe last week, Member Anderson, you gave a response to public comment. Member Noonenkamp, you did the week before. So Member Russell, you were up tonight if you're okay with that. Perfect. So the deadline to speak to sign up for scheduled public comment is Wednesday by 5 p.m. prior to the meeting through the City Clerk's office. This is an opportunity for the public to address City Council. There is an expectation that the presentation will be conducted in a respectful manner, and Council may ask questions for clarification, but there will be no dialogue, and please limit your presentation to 5 minutes. And I believe we have 3 people here for scheduled public comment tonight. Up first is Dan Tovado with Confluence Builders will address Council regarding an upcoming project, the Emerson. Good evening, Mr. Tovado. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
I am actually Matt McBride. Dan Tovado is my project manager.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Matt McBride.
Mayor?
Yes.
Point of information, I actually would like to have the city attorney explain the process. Have you gone through the process? Do you have a public hearing scheduled with planning and zoning or anything?
So the project that I'm getting ready to present today, we're not asking for a PUD. We're not asking for anything of council. We're only here for information. We're in for permit right now, following the use by right ordinance.
Okay, so I just would like the city attorney to weigh in before you share anything, because if something happens, it's possible that this council might be the final appeal on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Member Russell. City Attorney.
Yes, thank you. And just a little bit of background, the City Council acts as a quasi-judicial body in some zoning matters. So, for example, if you end up appealing some sort of city zoning issue, it could come before City Council to act as the judge on the zoning issue. If that should happen, they are required to consider only evidence presented to them during the hearing. While you certainly have a right to present to council, and we have no desire to regulate what you say, if you do present on a project that does end up coming before them in their quasi-judicial capacity, it's possible they would all be conflicted out from presiding over your project should you appeal it to City Council. So I will leave it up to you to give whatever information you deem appropriate. You certainly have the right to 5 minutes for signing up today, but just go into it knowing that if those things should all happen, there could be potential ramifications that perhaps you hadn't anticipated.
Understood.
Mr. McBride, and actually, City Attorney, I know that we have Mr. Tovado. Is there any reason why Mr. Tovado cannot speak tonight? Just because do we have a policy in place, City Attorney, that we stick to the name on the agenda?
Generally, yes, it does say that the person that signed up will be the one that speaks and that you can't give your time to somebody else to speak.
Okay.
He's ready.
Thank you, Mr. McBride. Mr. Tovado, if you could just state your name and your address or your cross streets.
Sure. My name's Dan Tovado. I don't live in the city of Englewood. My address is 12745 West 61st Avenue in Arvada.
Thank you, Mr. Tovado. When you're ready to speak or when your presentation is ready, you're ready to start.
Good. Hey, Will, can you change the input for me, please? Okay, is it, the PDF is fine. So yeah, we've been in communication with members of the city, and we're even asked to come and just introduce you guys to the project because we're not going through a PUD process, so. If you want, you can use the mouse to scroll. Sounds good.
All right, Mr. Tovado, you're able to begin when you're ready.
Sure. So the project we want to introduce you to is called the Emerson. Sorry, I'll slide down. Who we are, this is just a quick slide, and I won't dive into it too much. We're Confluence companies. We're a developer builder based out of Golden. These are some projects around the city that we've worked on in the past. This is a map of Englewood. The project we're proposing, or the project we're preparing to work on, is right here off of Emerson Street and Girard in the medical district. The project is within the M1 zoning that was put in place in 2009. A little bit of project information. Confluence recognized the need for housing within close proximity to the hospitals. Our vision is to create an exceptional housing for medical professionals and maturing millennials. 240 to 267 units, mix of townhomes, studios, 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. Luxury amenities, start date later this year in September 2022, as soon as we're through the permit process. We're targeting NGBS Gold certification for sustainability. This is a quick rendering of the building. Benefits to the city and community. We'll bring exceptional housing to the medical district. Project will be generating over $2.6 million in municipal taxes and fees, and $435,000 annual tax increment. Craig Hospital has expressed their need for additional housing and is looking to work with us on using one of our floors for housing for the hospital. Quick case for less parking, just to share the numbers. Currently the building is parked at 1.76 spots per unit. If we can reduce it down to 1.25 spots per unit, we'll be able to provide Craig 30 units on the 4th floor of the building. And these are just some quick statistics put out by RTD on properties around the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tovado, for the presentation. Any questions from council? Member Newnham.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Do you have an idea of what the price point of these units might be?
The price point in terms of rental? I do not, but they're market rate.
And they will all be rental, no purchasable units? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Mr. Tovado, a couple questions for me. Have you been in communications with Craig or with Swedish?
We have.
Okay. And then you make a statement if if you were to reduce parking, you were able to add another level. You stated that 30 of those would be for Craig. Can you specify what you mean by 30 for Craig?
That's the count of units that would fit on our 4th floor, and that's also the number of units that Craig has kind of requested from us. So that's why 30 units is shown in here.
So the 30 units would be specific for Craig employees or just anybody that works at Craig, or?
For Craig residents or
Oh, okay, I got it. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. People that are at Craig for
Correct.
one reason or another.
Yep.
Okay, I got it. Thank you, Mr. Tovado. Any other questions? Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Tovado. You're saying that the current parking requirement according to M1 zoning is the 1.75 per unit? Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Up next is Jeremiah Kell-Clark, an Englewood resident, to address council regarding 5G cell tower. Good evening, Mr. Kell-Clark. If you could just state your name or your address or cross streets.
Yeah, I'm Jeremiah Kell-Clark. I'm at Union and Galipago Street. All right, so hello again, everybody. Thanks again for your time. I won't be long this time, but I am here once again to ask that you please help us remove the 5G cell tower that's slated to be installed at 4709 South Galipago Street. We want you to know that we hear you when you say that legally you can't force AT&T to move this tower, since the site has already been agreed upon between the City of Englewood and AT&T, and a contract has been signed. However, we ask that you please hear us when we say that that doesn't mean there is nothing that you, the city, can do to help us. There's nothing in the overall agreement or the specific site agreement that states that once a site is agreed upon, there can be no further discussion or that the tower can't be moved without any legal recourse. We are asking that you, as our elected voice, please have this discussion with AT&T and advocate for your constituents. While we would also like to have our own conversation with AT&T, and we're still waiting for the city to give us their contact, we are asking that you, as our elected officials, to stand up to AT&T and explore all the potential options without having to endure any legal consequences. Like I mentioned last week, this is far from the last tower that AT&T will need to install in Englewood, so it is in their best interest to try and accommodate the city and its residents. Please be our voice and be the advocates and representation we were all hoping you'd be when we elected you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kell-Clark. Any questions for Member Noonan-Kemp?
Mr. Kell-Clark, good to see you again. Do you have an idea of when the project is set to be completed, or any of the timeline of the project?
No, unfortunately, according to Public Works, I guess they haven't submitted for the permit for the tower yet. So yeah, they were talking about it at the end of the month, but obviously that came and went. So.
Okay, and who have you asked for at the city for contact information for AT&T?
I believe Lindy's been talking to Mayor Pro Tem Ward, and then we've talked to Tim Hoos, I believe, at Public Works. So,
okay.
And we're waiting to hear back from
okay, thank you.
So.
Thank you, Member Noonan-Kemp. Anyone else? Seeing none, Mr. Kell-Clark, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Up next is Mr. Steve Kelly, an Englewood resident, to address council. Good evening, Mr. Kelly. I see you got a dongle there, so see if we can get this up and running. There we go. Quick and easy. So, Mr. Kelly, if you could just state your name and your address or cross streets, and then you can begin.
Yeah, Steve Kelly, Delaware and Radcliffe. I'm asking, has a decision been made on the fencing at Jason Park? I know last week there was a study session. Was the only time you spent studying at the last meeting? Have you thought more about it? Why not spend $200 for this type of fencing and see if it works? Direct City Manager Lewis to direct code enforcement to enforce this boundary line. I'm working on it. I'll just leave it at that boundary line. Let the court system inform everyone if the line is enforceable. If you recall last week, in one sentence, Dave Lewis poo-pooed the idea of a boundary line, saying it was unenforceable. Give the court system a chance. Mayor, you wanted to hear after 6 months how things were going. Well, the temporary fence was up only 3 weeks. First week it went up and they forgot to take it down. Second week it went up and down. Third week it went up and down and then it disappeared. I talked to one of the neighbors and she said during the t-ball games, kids were fully leaning into the fence. That's not vandalism, that's kids messing around. I don't know if they broke it or not, but give the system a chance to work. One try at the temp signs would be good. Remember, the park was closed for 6 months. History, Representative Woodward, I was told when you were mayor, you said no fences in parks. Here we are, fences, fences, fences. I know you're going to talk about Centennial later on. History, in the task force, Parks Department wanted a fence in the area, and a fenced-in area at Centennial Park. They couldn't find a convenient place, so instead they canceled off-leash there. It went from no convenient place to too many violations to, quote, we want to protect the wildlife. Reality, parks once, dogs gone. And you said no in 2020. You should have just said no, not sent them back to the drawing board. Their actions are now becoming harassment to the public, in my opinion. This is a false sign. I'm going to try and find it. Athletic field reserved, Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. If the athletic field is not reserved, then this sign is lying to the public. Clearly, in the middle of the day, there's no one out at the park, so the field isn't reserved. Future language should say, if or when the field is reserved, then dogs can't be out there. That's fair to the people. They don't need to be wondering. Representative Ward, Jason Park, we're just protecting the grass, is what you said last January. Centennial Park, we're just protecting the wildlife. What about the tax-paying public? No, it has been a nonstop assault on this 20-year successful program. And these actions have big negative impacts on citizens. It seems that City Council, the City Manager, and Parks has failed to recognize this sad fact. The net result has been a detriment to the community. That's in the strategic plan, community. It hasn't been a benefit. Look, the City Council has a code enforcement problem, not an off-leash problem. From my experience with off-leash since 2020, it's been a Dave Lewis problem. Cancel the Dave Lewis attitude, not a successful program. I am a retired teacher in the Cherry Creek School District, which serves Englewood. I've taught religious education for 20 years and been a religious ed director at a church in Englewood. Here's an analogy. A kid is talking in class and the teacher tells him 200 times to be quiet, but gives him no consequence. The kid keeps talking. Finally, the kid gets upset. No, the teacher has a conference, parent, teacher, administrator. Who is to blame? It's the teacher, not the kid. In this case, it's code enforcement officers that are to blame and the city manager. Correct the code enforcement problem, there will be no off-leash issues. Stop attacking the successful program, please. I got 10 seconds. I'll stop there, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Any questions from council? Seeing none, Mr. Kelly, thank you for your time tonight. And that concludes scheduled public comment. We will now move on to recognition of unscheduled public comment. We do have 3 speakers tonight. Same rules apply. You're limited to 3 minutes. But I'll go ahead and just call out the names. First up is Jan Weipert, here to speak to council regarding noise, I believe. I may be incorrect on that. Good evening, Ms. Weipert. If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Good evening. It's Jan Weipert, and I live off of Grand in Federal. This is kind of off cuff because I wasn't really thinking about speaking, but as the evening was coming close to walking the door, I thought there are some things I'd like to address. And I appreciate all the work that everybody does on council and our city people over here. Sometimes we get really upset and angry, but you guys are doing a lot for us in terms of time and energy, so it's appreciated. I'm gonna start with two things that I was not thinking about talking about. One is, I think we're all here because we live in our city. And hopefully we live in our city because we want to be here. It isn't by force. And we're part of a country. And that country is the United States of America. It's not yet one world order, although some people are working towards that. It's a little tiny piece of this country that I love very much. And I was watching people as the Pledge of Allegiance was being recited. And there were some people that were standing up with their hands over their hearts. There were other people that weren't. and there were people that we couldn't really see what was going on. But I hope that as we come into these rooms, we're saying we're here because we want to be here. And because it's a free country, nobody should be forced to say a pledge of allegiance. But if you don't want to be, I wish you'd get off of council and find somewhere else to be. But that's my opinion. Then along with that, I listened to these stories of council with the 5G towers and the dogs, and I think, you know, we're here to be, I have 3 minutes, right? We're here to hopefully have you as our employees look out for our best interests, and I don't think 5G towers are in our best interests, particularly not in residential areas. Now, I know that if I do something and I write a contract with somebody and there's something faulty in it, people can come after me as an individual. So I would hope the city would take that 5G information and go to the people that are putting these up or wanting to put these up and say, this doesn't work. We didn't realize the effect of this for neighborhoods, for property values, for people, and take a look at it and address it. The last thing I want to talk in my 10 seconds is election integrity. There's a problem with elections in our country, and it may be that we're going to see that Englewood has to make some decisions in the near future on how we're going to handle future elections. So I wish you would start thinking about it. That's all.
Ms. Wiper, thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your talk tonight. Up next is Ms. Dana Leipert, here to discuss some items. Good evening, Ms. Leipert.
Hi.
If you could just state your name and your address or cross streets.
Dana Liebert, cross streets, South Clarkson and Yale. So first, I want to say thank you, Member Newnenkamp, for your council request to Parks for an accounting of the percentage of native versus non-native plants. I hope that this data is the starting point for an informed discussion about the sustainability of our open space and parks. There's important nuance and detail, however, and it can be misleading to look at plant counts alone. To give one example, a few years ago, the round flower bed at Bates Logan was planted with a beautiful array of goldenrod. Goldenrod is one of the most important fall nectar sources for native pollinators and requires little supplemental irrigation. So I was really happy to see it planted there. The next year, it was gone. All the goldenrod was pulled out and replaced with a new annual planting. So that's one example of how it's more complex than just looking at the native plants. That goldenrod was watered daily, as are all the plants in the annual beds, and get replaced every year. So additionally, I have some comments about two of the programs that will be discussed later this evening as part of the Q2 updates and modifications to the strategic plan. So the first one, the neighborhood grant program to promote beautification service projects for neighborhood identification events, etc. So this program provides a perfect opportunity to integrate Council's pollinator resolution and other sustainability goals such as water saving, supporting pollinators, improving air quality, and creating resiliency. So I recommend that beautification be amended to include low water native landscaping to support pollinators and beautify neighborhoods, and for the city to offer ecological landscaping workshops that support this goal. I hope that this year the grant will integrate these specific goals in order to have a multiplier effect on the benefits that it yields. So quickly, in my last 20 seconds, the other program to reduce pesticide use. There's the recommendation to change the wording from reduce to limit, which suggests greater stringency, but it's still very vague and vulnerable to evasion.
Ms.
All right, I'm out of time.
Ms. Lieber, thank you very much for your time tonight. Any questions from council? Seeing none, thank you very much for coming and speaking tonight. And last up is Marjan Freeman. Oh, there we go. Here to discuss 5G. Good evening, Ms. Freeman. If you could just state your name,
Good evening.
address, or
My name is
cross
Marjan
streets.
Freeman. I'm at the corner of Tufts and Fox. I'm going to read as fast as I can since last week I couldn't finish it. Good afternoon, City Council. Since I was not able to finish last week, I thought I'd take another attempt at 5G tower subject. 4G, fourth generational, utilizes up to 5 gigahertz, averages 2 gigahertz in broadband, long wide band, and not short millimeter band, which is 5G and 6G are. These creates an electric magnetic field that is very unhealthy. To give an example, your microwave runs on 2.5 millimeter band, which are radiational frequencies. That is why it destroys the molecular structure of whatever you put in there to warm up. 5G goes to 60 gigahertz millimeter band, which it goes to the category of direct energy weapon. You can learn about this from military crowd control since 1970s, and because of the declassified military, you can learn about it. It is called magnified biology, an effect of electric magnetic field on biology. There is a reason they block them in other countries. Since our search engines such as Google and YouTube and etc. are controlled, I highly suggest research Brighteon.com to gain some knowledge on the effect of these microwaves on our health. Microwaves at 2.5 gigahertz cook your food. What do you think the 60 gigahertz is going to do? They will start with 5 or 10 gigahertz and then move up to 60 and 100. But they're building them to go on the high levels for reasons. Their goal is to go to 6G, is referred to as Slated, which is 10,000 times stronger than Wi-Fi. Signal on your cell phones are about 700 megahertz, which gives ability to watch movies, and now they're taking it to 60 gigahertz. 1,000 megahertz is equal to 1 giga. The magnitude of exposure is tremendous. The information about the effect of 700 megahertz is out there now because of the usage of cell phones with 4G and not even 5G that they're pushing. You can imagine effect of that on people. It is not your genes or your stress that they claim we inherited from our parents or our jobs. It is a fact that they are affecting our oxygen and hydrogen molecules, which directly affects our health. I won't get to the details since I don't have time. People fear what they don't understand. Take precautionary measures. Knowledge is key. Health is foundation. Wisdom is your power. Don't underestimate yourself. Exercise your full potential. Know your full capabilities, and don't assume somebody else is doing their homework. There has been no research done on these direct energy weapons that they share with us. So please set a ground foundation and direction in the approach of planning for these toxic towers in a way that our well-being is considered in our community first. Thank you for hearing me. Well, I hope I wasn't too much what I was trying to.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Thank you for your speech tonight. Any questions, Member Russell?
Thank you. Ms. Freeman, could you share with council some of the links that you shared in your presentation now? And I mean, as a matter of fact, if you have your presentation written out, if you could either send it to the city clerk or send it to the council members, I think that would be helpful for us.
Absolutely, I'll be glad to. It's unfortunate, I'd like to mention this because if you, again, search engines are very controlled. So if you try to go look up something like that, it's very doctrinated version of the knowledge and science. So you really have to dig in to understand how these waves affect us. I mean, it's equivalent of how whales and
I'm sorry, Ms. Freeman, she was just asking to get the links.
Yeah, Brighteon.com would be a place that you can find some of the material that is not, and I'll be glad to research some more. I mean, include it and then send it to the city council, and you can have it.
Thank
you.
I
can bring it next week, a copy for each one of you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman.
Thank you.
Anything else, Member Russell? Nope. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, Ms. Freeman, thank you for your talk tonight.
Thank you.
Perfect, and that now concludes Unscheduled public comments. Member Russell, you're up, and when you're ready, you can begin.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to each one of you for coming to present to City Council. Mr. Tovado for coming to share about your project. Best wishes to you. And so we appreciate that, and we'll see where it goes. Thank you so much for working with our city. Mr. Clark, I thank you for coming to us and reminding us that we work for you. You are absolutely correct that we do work for you. I know that council believes that, and to a certain extent, our hands are tied by federal and state government. And so I will see, actually I would, I do know that we have asked, I believe this is correct, for the design of that 5G tower that's designed to go up at Galipago and Delaware. Have we heard from them yet, City Manager?
Heard from whom?
AT&T regarding the design. The one thing that it's possible, and maybe, did that come from you, City Attorney? Okay, I apologize. I think that we may have control over the design standards, but that may be the only thing. Is there anything you wanted to share, or?
Yes, I'd be happy to share what I know. But first, this is a highly specialized area of law, very regulated by state and federal law. So we have reached out to an outside telecommunications expert, which is Ken Fellman and his staff, Colleen McCroskey, and asked them to weigh in on very short order because this is a very timely issue. They did review all of our documents, all of the permits, city code, applicable law, and they did recommend that we reach out to AT&T to make sure that their design standards are appropriate and comply with our permit and applicable law. And so we did advise city staff to do so. I understand that Public Works has reached out and is gathering that information.
Okay, thank you. So, and I believe that's in a council request, so, which that also is available to the public. Mr. Kelly, thank you for coming forward to share with us, and a decision has not been made on the fence. It is going to have to come back for, I believe, an ordinance change or resolution. I like your idea. Perhaps it's something that council could talk about, that at least trying the temporary fencing, but that's something that council would have to decide. So we'll go with that. But I thank you for bringing to our attention the situation there. Ms. Weipert, I greatly appreciate your input, and even though it just was off the top of your head, I know it's heartfelt, and I would like to say, as council members, we all took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Colorado, and our charter, and I take that very seriously. And we are your representatives, and I am here mainly because I love the public. I love every one of you, and I want to represent your interests and do the best that I can. And I just want to thank you for coming out, every one of you, because unless you communicate with us, we don't know. So I appreciate that. Ms. Leipert, thank you for the insight. I'm assuming, I believe this is correct, goldenrods are perennials, correct? And so I really actually like that idea. I've been trying to do that in my own yard because then you don't have to plant them every year. So, but sometimes they don't come up right away. I appreciate your insight on the grant funding, and I understand your request. I think sometimes, and council will look at that, but I also understand that sometimes things are cost prohibitive. but I see that this Sustainability Commission is working on those things. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Marjan, I greatly appreciate the insight that you get and the research that you do. And I thank you for that, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight and for sharing with us.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Anderson.
Yeah, I just had a quick question for City Manager Lewis related to the parking minimums. Do you know off the top of your head, if not, maybe this could be a council request, if that is one of if parking minimums for residential spaces is something being considered as a part of the Code Next rewrite?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, City Manager.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Mayor Pro Tem.
Just one point of clarification to offer, some information that I have that the rest of council might not be privy to because I've been working on the 5G issue. The last update that I have from staff indicates that we are waiting to receive a point of contact from AT&T who can respond to questions from citizens, and that information will be distributed as soon as it is available. So I wanted to let you know that so that that information is out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else? Seeing none, that now concludes public comment for the evening. We're going to take a 5-10 minute break. 10? We'll do a 10-minute break, so we'll come right back at 7:50. Thank you, everyone. Members of council, if you could please be seated. I don't think the mic is on.
Your mic won't work?
Test, test.
He just went to the restroom.
Thank you, members of council. It looks like we're now seated. City Clerk, is my mic working? Is people able to hear? Okay. Councilmember Wink, are you able to hear me on the audio? Perfect. So we'll just give it, oh, there we go. Now it's on. All right. All right, so we now move on to consent agenda items. Agenda item 9. I didn't receive an email from any council members asking to remove anything. Are there any changes or anything that we need to remove? Sorry, go ahead.
Actually, I apologize because I did have one that I would like to pull. It's 9A1, just for a question, and I totally spaced it out until I just saw it right now.
Thank you, Member Russell. Anyone else want to remove anything from consent agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 9A2 and 9B1?
I move to approve 9A2 and 9B1.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Could I get a second?
Point of order. 9A3 is also on there.
Oh, you are right. 9A2, 9A3,
And
9A3.
9A3.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Could I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could we please vote?
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Noonan?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Member Woodward?
Aye.
Mayor Sierra?
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you, everyone. Going back to 9A1, CB40, Member Russell, do you happen to have a question for City Attorney Niles?
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I do. It's, the question that I really had was, will this authority extend past the court system?
No, this would only apply to matters in municipal court. So, and just for some background for people watching, this ordinance would authorize additional people to serve documents for people in municipal court. And it would also authorize the municipal court judge, if someone is before him, to withdraw an arrest warrant if nobody objects, and instead just issue them a summons, which is kind of like a ticket. So that way they don't have to be arrested. They can just get a ticket that tells them when to appear.
I appreciate that, and I mean, that's what I understood from the council communication, but in the ordinance itself, it has like search warrant in there, and I think was the wording changed a little bit under service of search warrant?
Actually, this is already in municipal code, but we went ahead and proposed the service of search warrant. We put that section in there because the prior section refers to search warrants. So that's why we put that, just to clarify what it applies to. It was
Okay.
implied, but this makes it clear.
Right, but it's all in the courtroom system itself.
Yes, only in our municipal court would these apply.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Any other questions for the City Attorney? See none, can I get a motion to approve 9A1?
I move to approve 9A1.
Thank you, Member Russell. Could I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Can we please vote?
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Noonenkamp,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward,
Aye.
Member Wink,
Aye.
Member Woodward,
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you, City Clerk. No public hearing items tonight. We now move on to 11C1, a contract to provide security service for EVE and City Center properties. Up tonight is Director of Public Works Maria DeAndre and Senior Capital Project Specialist Melinda Goblich. I always forget the last name. Good evening, and please correct me on my pronunciation there.
I'd be glad to. You're very close. My name is Melinda Goblich, and I'm a Senior Capital Project Specialist with the Public Works Department. This evening, the presentation is to request that City Council approve a contract for security services for the Englewood Environmental Foundation and Civic Center properties. Let's see. There we go. The purpose of the contract is due to a number of events. In the beginning of 2022, Englewood Environmental Foundation and City of Englewood needed to terminate a contract with the security vendor for not providing the security service agreed to. At the time, the city had a number of separate contracts with different security providers for different departments with differing budgets and security needs. The city was also implementing a security assessment that recommended combining the security contracts under one universal agreement for efficient, effective, and uniform delivery and costs for security. A request for proposal was issued on May 12th of 2022. This RFP was to solicit proposals for both armed and unarmed security, 24/7 for the surrounding EVE properties, with additional security for Civic Center and Municipal Court during hours of operation. 5 proposals were received. Staff reviewed the pricing and qualifications of each based on a number of criteria. Allied Universal Security was selected with the best overall score. The staff recommends Allied Universal because Allied Universal have the professional qualifications, a history of providing security for government entities, their proposed work plan, response to the services requested in the RFP. They're familiar with the Civic Center, city procurement, and billing procedures, and they currently provide armed security for municipal court. Allied Universal was also the lowest price among the 5 proposals received. The EVE board did approve this contract at their meeting on July 21st. The EVE and city would enter into a 1-year contract with Allied Universal that will extend from September 6th through September 5th of 2023. This contract will be underwritten proportionally per the budgets, funding sources, amount, and types of services needed, and will be prorated between the remaining months of this year and extending to 2023. For the remainder of 2022, the EVE Fund for Professional Services in the amount of $128,290 will be used. And that's the remaining amount from the purchase order that was closed out for the previous security company when their contract was terminated. and then those remaining funds were transferred to this contract. We'll be also using a general EAF fund in the amount of $9,777 and a municipal court fund for security in the amount of $28,600. We will also be using the budget supplemental fund for $130,000. The budget supplemental amount was requested and approved by council in May of 2022. In 2023, again, we'll be using the EAF fund for professional services in the amount of $151,753 and the municipal court fund in the amount of $51,580 for a total of the $500,000. Staff recommends that City Council approve by motion a contract for services for Allied Universal Security Services to provide both armed and unarmed security for the EAF and City Center properties for a not-to-exceed amount of $500,000. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Koblish, for the presentation tonight. Member Anderson, kick us off with questions.
I left my light on. My apologies.
Thank you, Member
No
Woodward.
questions.
Member Russell.
Thank you. And this question may be for the city manager or for the Public Works Director, but the budget supplemental, why would we do a budget supplemental for the year 2023 when we haven't even passed the budget for 2023?
Yeah, I just noticed that, Councilmember Russell, we did that for 2022, so the intent was to pay for a portion of the Civic Center costs from the general fund. So we're gonna reallocate that and actually use the budget supplemental in 2022, and then use we'll have 2023 allotment in the 2023 budget for next year. So we'll change that one element. I overlooked that in the council memo process.
Okay, but if we already have 2022 covered, so are we gonna use that someplace else?
Well, we have enough for the EAF part, but not for this. The 130 was intended for the Civic Center portion. So that actually has to come from the general fund, not from EAF. So that was what the 130 was intended for. So we'll redo those numbers and actually allocate a portion from the general fund, which is that 130. And then if needed, we'll carry that over into next year for that, the amount to cover for 2023.
Okay, thank you. And then is this an increase in contracted security services?
It is. So what we're adding is the internal to the Civic Center security, which we've never had before.
And that includes the armed people. We haven't had that before, correct?
We have. We currently, for the hours of the court operation, we always have an armed guard at the front area.
Okay.
We do already.
All right. And what would happen if City Council dissolved EAF to this contract?
We're on I believe it's a month-to-month basis. So we would terminate the contract or terminate portions of the contract, or we would transfer then the EAF costs in some other way, or would have to cover those services in some other way, and then would have to back that out of the current contract.
So is the contract with EAF or is it with the city?
It will be with the city, but the EAF is basically providing a portion of the costs, but the contract itself will be with the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Woodward.
I have a few questions that I would like answered. References. Were references checked? And I saw a few accounts that I'm aware of with Allied Universal, large accounts. They were accounts.
So,
Allied Universal, Oxford Hotel, or RTD, City of Denver.
correct.
I believe all those accounts were terminated last week. So I'm curious as to references of any of them. I didn't see any of them except for downtown Denver.
Yeah, and in all honesty, we didn't check the references for them, kind of figuring if they were given as references that they would be positive. And I wasn't aware that those contracts had been canceled recently.
I believe they were. I couldn't swear it, but I feel pretty close to certain that I heard that on the news. I know that they have handled accounts in other cities, Arvada for one, Adams County for another one. I have a couple of questions, for example, on post orders. Will every guard that's here, I think I would like to see it as a requirement that they are familiar with and frequently review post orders.
So, yes, that is correct. The intent was that we would have the contractor prepare the post orders for the different types of security that's required, and that the guards or security personnel on working at those hours would be familiar with those, and that there would be some sort of a system of set up to be able to test or review with them to make sure they know what to do in different situations.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's really important. Also, armed officer certifications they have to update, I think it's at least annually, possibly every 6 months within the company, and that those trainings are actually happening, and that they are certified by the company that they're happening.
Yeah, correct. I know we have the requirements listed in the RFP for the post certifications and so forth. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're trained by Allied with guns. Okay. And they renew that. I mean, they don't go through a week of this shooting and target practicing and using OC and that sort of thing. They come back and redo it, because if you don't practice, you lose a skill.
That's very true. That's correct. Yeah, and also that Allied Universal is currently providing the armed security for municipal court.
Mm-hmm.
Member Woodward, do you mind if I pause you on the questions? I see City Manager Lewis has his light on. Do you mind?
No,
and I'll come right back to you. City Manager Lewis, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I was able to look into the Denver termination, and it appears you are correct. There was a shooting by a Universal security guard of someone who was on a property that was being secured by the company, and the city did choose after that shooting to terminate that contract. I'll mention that it appears the employee has been terminated as well from the company, but you are correct.
Okay. I think it was also RTD for their online for light rail, their online guards. the Oxford Hotel also, which is a separate private account, but the grounds and the gates were Allied. And I don't know who's doing that now, or if they have a period of time. But I have a concern.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Any further questions?
No.
Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. When is this, and I'm hearing Member Woodward's, I was not aware that these contracts have been terminated, and it's concerning to me. When is this contract, when would it go into effect? And is there time for council to learn a little more before making a decision on this?
Yeah, we were currently looking at, we do have the month-to-month agreement with the current security company that's doing the short-term security for us until we can get a permanent contract in place. And so we were looking at starting the contract with Allied Universal as quickly as we could after tonight's meeting, if approved. And so we were looking at their contract starting on September 6th, which would be like the day after Labor Day, and then extending the current short-term security through Labor Day.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Member Noonan-Camp.
Yes, I just have one. Something you mentioned earlier just gave me pause, that we didn't call the references because we assumed that they would be positive. Is that standard practice for the department?
I'm sorry, we
Is that the standard practice to not call references?
No, I don't believe so. I think it was just in this incidence when we were discussing, about following up and calling some of the references we had received. There was just kind of a consensus that if they were given as references, they would probably be positive, and that we didn't follow through with it at the time.
Okay, that's helpful. And also just concerning to me. I don't think that's an assumption that we can make, especially for such an important contract that interfaces with our community.
So, that, I agree.
Yeah, that is not standard practice for the department. We do check references on all contracts. I think in this case, because Allied was providing service for the courts, that was the primary reason why we chose not to in this case.
Mayor, if I could, we can postpone this if you'd like to. We can put this on the 15th.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. I was going to ask that question as well, but this is something that we could postpone just based on the information that came to light tonight. I would be in favor of that, but Member Anderson.
I would be in favor of postponing, but I want to make it clear that that doesn't particularly mean I'm a no vote on it or anything like that. I've just heard enough tonight that makes me want to know a little more. And, Allied, I know it's a large company, and sometimes things go wrong in certain places. So that would maybe set off some particular contract or something like that. So to me, this is just a matter of getting more information so we really know what we're looking at before we make a decision on it.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'd like to add to that. I feel similarly. I think in this case, the score sheets and perhaps the other responses that we received, since we're looking at evaluating the decision here a little more closely, would be helpful to that decision.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And City Attorney, I think that I have to make a motion to postpone to time certain, right, for August 15th? Is that
yes,
is that the preference?
Yes,
that's the
please.
preference, right? Can I get that motion from?
I move to table the resolution for Allied Security until August 15th, date certain.
Thank you, Member Anderson.
Seconded.
Thank you, Member Noonan-Camp. Any further comments? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Member Anderson.
Aye.
Member Noonan-Camp.
Aye.
Member Russell.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward.
Aye.
Member Wink.
Aye.
Member Woodward.
Aye.
Mayor Sierra.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you very much for the information tonight, everyone. Moving on to 11C2, Quarter 2 updates and modification of the City of Englewood Strategic Plan. We have Assistant City Manager Tim Dodd here to present. Good evening, Mr. Dodd.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So for those of you who were on council a year ago, this was standard practice. I came before you on a quarterly basis. And so it's important, I think, that I stress this is the first time that I'm doing it under the new strategic plan, that this really is your quarterly opportunity to weigh in on the strategic plan, both on its progress, but also in terms of any edits that you may have. I'll just quickly kind of go over the process. So City Manager Lewis and I meet with directors on a monthly basis. At those meetings, he meets with them twice a month. I meet with them once a month in one of the meetings. We go through all the projects that tie to their department, and they give us a summary of where they're at. At the third meeting of the end of their quarter, they let us know, okay, I'll say it's in progress, it's completed, it's off track, etc. And so then we pass those recommendations on to you, which is why you see a few modifications that we're proposing that one of the commenters earlier today discussed. And so I'll just quickly, we have in front of you the entire deck that's attached. So once if you do approve this tonight, this does get posted both on what we call the eHub, which is our intranet for internal employees, and then we also do post it on the city's website. I want to point out that this report only focuses on what we call the key projects. There's two other components that are not included in this. One are the projects in development, so we're planning, unless you would like us to present on those more frequently, we'll be presenting on those on an annual basis, as those were the ones that you asked us to kind of put on the back burner, so to speak. And then number two, the metrics. We do have the data for the performance metrics for the second quarter. We're just working with IT to develop that dashboard. It's taking a little bit longer than we expected, but hopefully it will be done in the next few weeks, and I'll be sharing that with you. And so this slide just gives you a quick update on where we're at. It's no surprise that it's probably a good thing that the majority of the projects right now are in progress. As a reminder, this is basically halfway through the year. However, we really only started work on many of these in the second quarter, which I believe started in March. And so you see here we have about 21 that are completed, some that are delayed, and I think 5 or so that we're requesting you consider modifying or removing. What I would like to do, Mayor, if it's okay, is I would like to go to this slide for each and just highlight a few projects that have been completed, and then see if Council has any questions on that before I move to the next.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me for that approach. Any objection? I think we'll look good.
Great.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so community well-being is our newest section. As you're all aware, some of the key highlights from this are, as we talked about tonight with one of the community members, implementation of the off-leash program, also the work we did in the library, which is part of our facilities goal. We also successfully applied for the Make a Splash grant. We didn't get the money that we hoped, but we did get something, and this is a program that the state of Colorado launched. Also the work on the History Nook in the library, and then we're continuing to improve how we share information on events, and then the program for veterans has been implemented. Are there
any questions? Member Russell.
So can we ask questions on the other parts of the presentation under community well-being?
If you have any questions, yes, of course, Member Russell.
So under the physical and mental health, implement free social pass for Malley Center recreation for patrons over 55. And it says under the notes, it's ongoing, it says 5,000 postcards sent out to residents and non-residents. Can we get the information about how many people applied for that as a result of the postcards going out?
Yeah, is it okay if Director Underhill assists me in answering that?
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question. In fact, we had the Malley Trust Fund meeting today, and we've had a great response of new members joining Malley. I think there's 171 individuals. I don't have the exact breakdown in front of me to tell you how that looks with residents and non. The majority have been new residents joining Malley. And so the postcards were sent out to about 1.5 miles circumference around the Malley Center. So both Denver residents and Englewood residents received those.
So do we know if they, of these 171 people, how many actually applied because of the postcard?
From my understanding, a majority of those people actually walked in with the postcard in hand and asked for the pass. So it was pretty successful in doing that mailing.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate that. Then, the next question that I have is on, homelessness services and mitigation. And it said the next, Homelessness Connect event, next scheduled event for September. Do we know when and where?
Yes, we do. September 29th, it's a Thursday. It'll be from 10 to noon is the tentative time. It might go till 1 o'clock. It will be at Cushing Park unless we have inclement weather, which then we'll move it here to the Civic Center in Hampden Hall in the community room. And we are recruiting partners to be at that event. We just secured haircuts. We have a laundry truck coming. So again, September 29th, 10 to 1 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. And then, next one is right under it. Develop and execute a plan to bring the Ready to Work program to the Tri-Cities. It says location under contract, more than 50% startup secured. Is that the cross-purpose contract or?
No, Member Russell, it's, so the organization that runs Ready to Work is called Bridge House, and they have a location in Boulder and one in Aurora, and we'll be coming to you on August 15th, I believe, to, for you to consider appropriating funding for that. And if you do that, then we would talk about a contract. But the original ARPA list had about $850,000 for Bridge House.
Okay, thank you. And then the next one is under arts and culture, and it says identify funds for ongoing maintenance of public art, requested 250.
I think it should be K.
K, okay.
Yeah, I think.
I was gonna say L, I've not heard that.
250 liters, I guess, right?
For, from 2023 to 2028. Is that Museum of Outdoor Arts, or is it just, so what is this?
So this is in preparation for the Museum of Outdoor Arts exiting the city. Initially, they had talked about taking many of their pieces of art with them, and at this time, they're gonna keep them here for the most part. And so the thought was giving more funding to the arts program through the Cultural Arts Commission to purchase new pieces of art to implement in our city. So as the Museum of Outdoor Arts starts to transition some of their pieces out, we could start replacing those pieces with Englewood art with that funding.
And do we have a contract coming forward or an agreement with MOA because, or they're just leaving it here? Is it going to cost us money to maintain it, or?
Thank you for the question, Member Russell. We have received communication from the Museum of Outdoor Arts that they plan to enter into an agreement with us, but to leave the art here will be at no cost to the city.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I just think I only have one more question, and that is the very last one on food system. Encourage a grocery store or food co-op in the South Broadway area to ensure Englewood is a 15-minute city. So where are we looking at that?
I can ask community development for the analysis they conducted, but I believe it's on the southern part of Broadway.
I would actually refer to Member Anderson, who pointed out there is a food desert based on his research into the 15-minute city. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, when we did the walk and wheel update, they did an analysis of 15 minutes from each of our different grocery stores, and there was a place kind of in the middle of the city near, I would say probably Quincy and Broadway, where the people living in that area are more than 15 minutes. Otherwise, almost the entire city is covered. So this was one that I think was added at my request. I didn't think we did all vote on it, but I don't know anything beyond what analysis has been, or what I suggested. I don't know if a further analysis has been done on that.
Okay, thank you. So when we're looking at these and voting on them, we're at this point still just researching, or if we approve it, since we know now that Quincy and Broadway, or whatever, will those be approved and just move forward?
So things that are in the plan, like this project, will continue to move forward. But this is an opportunity for you if you would like to remove things from the plan, modify things, add things. This is really kind of the schedule that we have to open the plan up, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. And so the ones that are moving forward with difficulty or challenges, the yellow, is it possible at some point they might come out of the?
That is possible. So again, we do track these on a monthly basis, and we provide them to you quarterly. So a director could make a recommendation. That happened, I think, several times last year. When we got to the end of the year, there were, I forget the exact number, but there were several that we basically asked council to carry over into the next year.
Okay.
So that could happen.
All right, thank you. I appreciate those answers.
Any other questions from council on community well-being? Seeing none.
Great. In governance, we have one project completed so far, establishing a holiday lunch, but it's actually been very successful for employees, and really just a continuation of an existing program, although we've gone to kind of a virtual model in the last 2 years because of the pandemic, but it's one where employees can actually go to select local restaurants for lunch during that week, and it's wildly successful. Many things are in progress here. We do have, again, the one that's been complete, and I think 1 or 2 that are delayed, but there's definitely several things that are on our list here to work on going into the next couple quarters. Infrastructure and transportation.
Actually, before we go on, let me see if there's any questions from council on governance. Member Russell.
I had a couple. One of them is on, under staff training and development, implement social contracts in each working group. And so my question is, what does that mean? And where did that idea originate from?
Thank you, Member Russell. I'll take that one. When we were doing our leadership retreat with Kerry, can't remember his name, but he actually did your leadership or your city council retreat 2 years ago. He recommended that we have a set of operating kind of guidelines in which we commit to one another. And so we named that a social contract. It's things like we won't talk about each other behind each other's backs. We will speak with one voice when we're communicating back to employees instead of letting employees know that we were split 50-50 and that sort of thing. So it was just a set of about 10 or 12 commitments to one another that we intend to keep. Also, when we have a problem with someone, that we go to them directly instead of going to someone else or going to me to resolve that we resolve that directly with the person. So we're glad to provide that. I think I actually have provided city council with ours for the leadership team, but I'll resend that.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, is this just for the leadership team, or is it all employees?
Thank you, Member Russell. So right now we have one just for the leadership team, but this goal is about trying to implement that across the organization. And then you see here mentioned in the notes, Choose People. That's our organizational culture program that we're about to wrap up for supervisors, managers, directors, and deputy directors.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I guess the other thing that is a little bit concerning is there's a few of them in here for part of the planning for the potential move of the Civic Center. I mean, council hasn't really determined that yet, but it's kind of like the strategic plan is moving forward with that.
So the work that we're doing is anticipating the possibility of a move, but we know that it might not happen. We know that it also might happen. And so really the work that we're doing right now is really just around data collection, trying to get 2 things. Number one, quantitative data collection around space needs. How many people are in the office? What types of meeting needs do you have? And then also qualitatively just trying to figure out where people are at in terms of, are they comfortable with hoteling, just kind of using different spaces? Are they comfortable sharing an office? So right now we're just collecting data, given that it is a possibility that we could move in the future.
Okay, but it also could work for what we're doing here too, correct?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Assistant City Manager.
Great. So infrastructure and transportation. This was 2 sections. It became 1. There are several here that are delayed that we're working on, mostly related to staffing, but several are in progress. And a few of the key projects that we have completed relate to constructing prioritized sidewalk segments, the bonding work, and then specifically the WIFI alone, I think, was a major achievement in this goal area in the last quarter.
Any questions? Go ahead, Member Russell.
So one thing in here is the, under sustainable infrastructure funding, dissolve the Englewood Environmental Foundation and pay off the debt. We paid off the debt on June 1st. So I'd like to know when City Council is going to discuss the dissolution of EVE, whether we should dissolve it or not.
I was just conferring with the city attorney. We are moving towards that. We haven't set that on the calendar, but is there anything you'd like to add?
We're just waiting on some final information, but we have it on our calendars and we are planning to move it forward, but we're waiting on final information regarding environmental matters.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Todd. Member Woodward.
Can I ask, in the event or moving forward with the dissolution of EVE, who is going to be managing the properties that EVE currently manages? That is the portion of City Center. Will the city be doing that?
I would say to be determined on that. There is required to be a manager of the common area maintenance, and it's possible the city could step in as the manager under the contract with the other property owners and tenants. However, it's also possible we could consider hiring a third party to take over as the CAM, common area maintenance as CAM. As the CAM manager. So we definitely have some options, and we would need to coordinate with the other parties and see what their thoughts are. We have contracts with RTD, for example, regarding maintenance of the common areas. So we would need to reach out to our business partners and have that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Member Russell.
Thank you. And the other question that I have is there's about 6 yellow triangles that are all on hold due to staffing under multimodal transportation, the scooter program, the walk and wheel plan, and then dangerous intersections. Is there a staff person in the budget that we just haven't hired yet, or there is no staff to address any of these?
Member Russell, that's a very astute question because in fact you do have a request that's pending from the Public Works Department to fill the traffic engineer. And so if you look at those projects that are on hold, they're almost all related to traffic or multimodal transportation. So I don't think that's coincidence. And that is a position that we basically didn't fill last year, and so it is being requested this year to be filled.
Okay, thank you. So whatever we do with that position will depend on moving forward with these projects, right? I mean, the plan now is to move forward.
I think that's a good assessment, yes.
Okay, thank you.
See no further questions, Mr. Dodd.
Great, thank you. The next one is economy. So we don't have any projects here that have been completed. There's one that we are requesting a modification on. And at the end, Mayor, I was just going to go through the 5 that we're requesting modifications. There's one here.
Any questions on economy? Member Russell?
So on the things that were, let's see, the circle with a line through it, what does that mean? We're not doing that anymore?
It means that maybe I should come up with a better icon. If you have any suggestions, let me know. But it means we're requesting that council consider either removing it or modifying it. So in the case of this one, we have the project as Small Business Saturday, but Director Power and his department have recommended that given that we have an agreement with the Greater Englewood Chamber of Commerce to work on a variety of projects related to small businesses, that we expand this project to focus on that agreement.
Okay. I have some problems with this because I have heard that the CEO of the chamber is stepping down because of some pretty significant differences between him and the city. And I think that perhaps council needs to be made aware of those differences. Perhaps we could get him to come and speak to council.
Member Russell, I would be happy if you would share those with me, as I am not aware of any disagreements between the city and the chamber. We've had an excellent working relationship over the last year or more.
He hasn't told you why he's stepping down?
I haven't spoken to him. It was actually our our manager of economic development that informed me of that. So no, I have not been informed.
Okay, this goes back to really what I suggested this council not do, and that was to close down ACE. And I think this is something that the council should look at, rather than just changing to move forward with the chamber. I think that council needs more information on this one. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could, I was able to meet with the Chamber Board President and the immediate past president last week. And while it had not yet been announced, I think on the staffing change there is still a remaining staff member at the Chamber. The CEO has agreed to stay on board until a replacement is found, is what I'm told. So I have high confidence that the board is committed to making sure that the commitments found in the agreement are met, and they're on track so far.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. Any other questions? Mr. Dodd?
Thank you. The next one, neighborhoods. We had 2 that were completed. So the neighborhood map, thank you for your work and support on that. And then also the neighborhood grant program.
Any questions on neighborhoods? See, we got one change that we may be speaking on, so no questions. We can move on to the next.
Safety. We have 3 that are complete, so it's not several, but it is a high percentage of this section. We did hire the community relations crime prevention coordinator, who's really been doing quite a bit of work. There was an event last week that was kind of an afternoon coffee with a cop. She's played a critical role in the National Night Out that some of you are participating in tomorrow. We've also worked to establish protocols with the dispatch center to divert mental health calls, and then also implemented the emergency management training. I believe, as you're all aware, we do have a new emergency management coordinator named Eric White through the county that we've met with a couple times, who will probably be presenting a report to you in the next few months.
Member Woodward.
Yeah, I just have a question on that. Why are we not using Arapahoe County Dispatch for, is there a reason for that?
I'm not sure of the history of that, Member Woodward, but I can ask the chief, or we can do a council request on that.
Please do a council request. And I'm just wondering if it's more cost effective to be doing it with Arapahoe County. And it may not, one of the other things I've thought about it was because of the type of calls we may have where we're doing this alternative policing, Arapahoe County may not be doing that, and we're doing that selectively with our people. So, just a question.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Any other questions? Seeing none, we can move on to sustainability, I believe.
Great. Yep. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, the last section is sustainability. In this one, we have worked to establish our asset management program. The neighborhood grant program is also referenced here because of its relation to sustainability and small demonstration projects in neighborhoods. We've continued to develop and improve the E3 program, which is a grant program for homeowners related to energy efficiency. We continue to develop the program of Broken Tea with electric golf carts. We conducted an employee survey that was really critical in understanding commuting patterns. There's actually a new statewide program that might allow us to get, I think it's $250,000 from the state if we do have an alternative commuting program, so it's something we're investigating. And then we held through SPR the successful annual river and stream cleanup event.
Any questions on sustainability? Member Russell.
Thank you. Actually, on my two questions are on the things that Ms. Liepert brought up. I actually, on reduce the use of pesticides in parks and open spaces, it says modify, change from quote, reduce to limit. What does that mean?
Thank you, and I'll start answering, but I'll ask Director Underhill to come up to finish. So essentially, my understanding, this was a recommendation from staff, is that we can only really reduce to a certain point, and then at that point it becomes that we're limiting the use. So I don't know the exact percentages, but I think the goal has been to reduce it to a level that we're able to reduce it to, and then to kind of keep it at that level.
Assistant City Manager Tim Dodd's correct on that. We can reduce, and we have been reducing. We don't broad spray any pesticides in our parks. And so the goal is to limit as best as possible, depending on the year. This year we had a very rainy year, which brings weeds. We hand pull when we can, but ultimately we spray when we need to. And like we talked about, reducing is one thing, but limiting as best as possible is our goal.
Okay, and so is it mostly for financial reasons? Because it is cost prohibitive and labor prohibitive to pull weeds everywhere we have them.
That would be a correct statement. We don't have enough staff to pull weeds for the amount of acreages that we have in our city.
And so and you're being judicious in where you do it. And I agree with that. The next one is the very next one about using organic fertilizers. It says organic fertilizers are currently being used in all of the parks, and
we are using them heavily. Colorado's Finest was our first test case, and it did very well there. And so we've increased application of organic fertilizers throughout our park system, and we'll continue to do that. We're seeing good success with that.
And it also is financially sustainable too, correct? Is it a lot more expensive to do that?
It's a little bit more costly, but we see the benefit in using that. And long term, I think the cost will go down as more use continues with organic fertilizers across the state.
Right. And I think, and I don't think I marked this before, but I see what Ms. Liepert says about using perennials versus annuals. And I think that's something that we need to consider doing, because then we wouldn't have to be doing it year after year. So,
we agree with that, and something we're looking into. There's some costs associated with that, and it's analysis that our Parks Division is doing, in addition to native areas and non-native areas, and where we can implement more of that.
Right. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? All right, I don't see any further questions, so Assistant City Manager Dodd, do you need us now? Well, no further questions. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to go back, and this question may have been under infrastructure. Is that where the hotel is? Now we're moving it out of city center area?
It's under economy.
Under economy, okay. So, I mean, I was a little bit frustrated at seeing that now we'll move it someplace else.
So this, that language under project was language that was included in the plan that was approved in March. And then the work, but to note the work in the possible redevelopment of this location is that there is a plan for 105 plus hotel room. So if council would like to change that language, we're happy to do that.
So it is in the, let's see, it is in the plans, but not necessarily in this area anymore?
So it is in SKB, the master developer's plan, to have a hotel in this area. but the way it was written in the strategic plan that was approved was if it isn't feasible to explore other locations. But right now, it seems to be on track for this
Okay.
area, yeah.
All
Sorry if
right,
there was
that's,
yeah, sorry.
all right, now that makes sense. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. I appreciate that.
It's basically like like a catch clause if things don't work out.
Any other questions? Sina, was there any type of summary that you wanted to go over, City
Thanks,
Manager
Mayor.
Dodd, before we make a motion to approve?
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to really check in. The last thing I wanted to do, and I apologize, next time I'll have a slide on this, but in your packet in the memo, there's 5 recommended modifications and deletions. And so I think we went through a few of them. So I just wanted to confirm that council is okay with those, or if you have any other modifications you would like to make at this time.
Are there any other changes that council would like to make at this point? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve 11C2?
I move to approve 11C2.
Thank you, Member Noonan Camp. Could I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Any further comments?
I
Yes,
just
Member
want
Russell.
to.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
No,
didn't wait.
go ahead. You're good.
I appreciate the work that you've done on this, and yes, I am totally in favor of removing single hauler trash. And so, it's slated to be removed, because I don't want to deal with this again.
It is.
Next year. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the salt to the wound there, Member Russell, so. No further comments, can we please vote? Oh, sorry, anything else, City Manager Lewis?
I just
Before we
wanted to
vote?
say I really appreciate the robust conversation. I think this is one of the most important things that you do. So the more you ask questions and dig into the details, the better we are as an organization. So thank you.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis, and now can we please vote?
Member Anderson,
Aye.
Member Noonan Camp,
Aye.
Member Russell,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward,
Aye.
Member Wink,
Aye.
Member Woodward,
Aye.
Mayor Sia.
Aye.
Let the record show 7 ayes.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Manager, Assistant City Manager Dodd, and all the work that went into it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor, if it's okay if I say this is the first time, obviously, I've presented it to this council. So if you have any feedback on things you'd like to see or how you'd like to see this presentation, please share it with City Manager Lewis or I.
Will do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we now move on to general discussion, Mayor's Choice. I have a couple of items. I'll move through them pretty quickly, but first up is the Centennial Park off-leash rules discussion. Thank you to Member Russell for reminding us during the last meeting. I believe it might have been last week. We haven't really decided or gave direction to staff regarding citizens that have come forward in the form of a petition, but would like for us to reinstitute off-leash dog rules within Centennial Park. If we all remember, that was that park was removed as part of the change about a year ago. And so I guess tonight just wanted to get feedback from council whether or not this is something that you would like to move forward with. Mayor Pro Tem, I'm not sure if there's anything that you want to add on this, but I know one of the reasons why it was suggested that this be removed, and I think it was part of just the fact that not only was it off-leash, not only was it just off-leash complaints, but it also was more towards wildlife as well, if I remember correctly, regarding Centennial Park. So I think at this point, if anybody just wants to give direction in terms of which way they want to go, I am fine with just keeping it off. I understand the complaints by the citizens that were enjoying this park for off-leash rules, but I still want to continue moving forward with the plan that we implemented last year and just see where that goes. I have, up until, I'm trying to think of the citizen's name. I had it off the top of my head, but I think I may have been mistaken on the name. But I would be fine with just keeping the rules as is, but I do understand their concerns. Anyone else want to weigh in? Member Russell.
After looking at this petition, I actually think it's pretty well written, and they have a solution to their problems. They would like to be able to walk their dogs off leash from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every morning. They are willing to pay $20 a year for a licensing fee, and if any incidents occur among registered dogs and owners, the dog and owners would permanently be banned from doing that. I think that's a reasonable, I think it's reasonable to try that.
Thank you, Member Russell. Anyone else want to weigh in? Mayor Pro Tem.
I think I can color this a little bit for council. I met with these people. One of them, the lady who brought forward the petition, Ms. Mucklow, Bonnie Mucklow, lives in District 4. I met with her and with a District 3 resident and someone from outside our city and discussed the possibility of reopening Centennial Park. And what I told them was I did not think that this council had an appetite to revisit the issue. I'm supportive if we want to go back and look at the policy at Centennial Park to accommodate a group of largely elderly dog walkers between 6 and 10 a.m. That's a discussion I'm willing to have and something that I could probably support based on the feedback that I got from this group of people. But they have decided not to go through the official petitioning route, which was a discussion I also had with them. So that's where we stand on it right now.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else want to weigh in? I know it's always one of our favorite topics, so Member Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I've talked to a couple of these folks as well previously, actually, before they came and presented their petition. And my kind of stance was that one of the reasons that we, if I remember correctly, that we decided not to move forward with off-leash privileges at Centennial Park was because of some bites that had actually happened there, and also because of the nature of the way the trail goes. They're enclosed with a lake on one side and a fence on the other, so it's easy for a person who doesn't have a dog or an encounter to happen where the dogs can potentially feel trapped. And so for that reason, I'm really hesitant to revisit it, but I'd be happy to, I would not want to move forward with that discussion. But yeah, so that's where I'll leave it.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Anyone else? We do need 4 in either direction tonight, so. Member Woodward?
Yeah, I would like to wait out the 1 year. Didn't we discuss doing 1 year on this?
City Manager
Actually,
Lewis,
before my time.
do you recall, or
Yes, it was 1 year.
1 year that we would come back and revisit? And when did the 1 year begin? Was it November, December? January. So we will be talking about it in the new year, or getting an update in the new year.
And I would like to get feedback from, as the liaison to the Parks and Recreation Commission, talking to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Member Wink.
I would also like to not completely shut down the proposal and the to pay the cost and by the Centennial Group. I think it was really wonderfully put together proposal. I was impressed when I saw it. But I think if we, it's been a short period since we made our decision, 1. 2, if we entertain their proposal now, not to punish them, but why would we not reopen all discussions for all the off-leash decisions we made recently? What's to stop that whole thing from coming open again? And so I think as good measure, just to make the best of the whole situation for everyone, I would like to revisit that, and probably others may come up with similar proposals or other pieces for us to consider again in January. So in January, definitely happy to look at that again.
Thank you, Member Wink. Member Russell.
Okay, it's obvious, I don't believe that there is consensus to move forward with that right now. But I also would like to perhaps talk about the suggestion about the temporary boundaries because we haven't, the ordinance is coming through, is there, Director Underhill, is there, any more games at, Jason Park before the ordinance would come through?
Currently, Pirate Youth Sports, who rents the field, does not have any league going on. They will start back up in the fall, and I think that's late September, early October.
Okay, so when is the new ordinance coming forward, do you know? Is it gonna be on the 15th for the permanent fence, or is it gonna be farther away than
It
that?
looks like we can probably bring it back on the 15th.
So is there any opportunities to put temporary boundaries up before we do that?
So we had the A-frame signs that were out stating the hours that the field was being rented. Those could be used. From our experience, those haven't stopped dogs. They don't know the boundary. It's up to the owners to stop the dogs from entering the field if people are using it.
So if word got out that they were doing that, I mean, I think at Jason Park, they generally pretty well self-police. I mean, I saw that when I was over, every time I've been over there. So I don't know if that's something that this council might be interested in doing before we put up, I mean, do trial things, you know, for practices or whatever.
Thank you, Member Russell.
Thank you.
Member Woodward?
You know, just historically, we've really moved a long way from, it takes now an organized game, you know, being scheduled. It used to be that if a pickup game came along or something like that, that this was a people park for people and there were off-leash privileges. And so I think we're really moving away from that. And the signs that Mr. Kelly brought forward or showed us tonight, I don't know why those signs, we used to do programming through Englewood Parks and Recreation before there was Pirates Youth Sports for different things, young kids t-ball, or young kids soccer, that sort of thing, very young kids, 4 or 5 year olds and stuff. And to have to schedule it, you know, a people's type park, I think is wrong afield. So I have a problem there.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes, Member Anderson.
We're not discussing the agenda item anymore, and there is no motion on the table, so I'm not sure if we should be discussing.
That's correct, yeah.
Fence at this point.
Thank you, Member Anderson.
Sorry.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Thank you, Member Anderson. I'm trying to think, I think we do have consensus on not, or at least we'll continue the conversation in January regarding Centennial Park. So I think, Member Anderson, thank you very much for correcting us on that. So, Member
Except
Russell.
for point of order, there really was no motion on the table. We were talking about consensus. Thank you.
Any further comments before moving on to the next agenda item? So then moving on to separate agendas for study sessions and regular meetings. We talked about this a couple months back. I think Mayor Pro Tem, you're the one that reminded me of this on the last Mayor Managers meeting, but wanted to put this on the agenda. City Clerk, is there any reason why we wouldn't be able, why we shouldn't have separate agenda items for study sessions? The only reason why I'm asking is because we've had conversations about the AV and the YouTube or the feed for the meetings. That would be my only concern, but I don't think that is affected by separate agenda items.
Yeah, so we just need a better understanding. So as long as we keep it all one meeting as far as technology goes, where it's streaming and it's going, we can create 2 separate agendas if that's what you're asking. But my question is, does that mean the 2 separate rooms, or it's just 2 separate agendas even though we're conducting business in here, so the public has a better idea of when the actual meeting starts?
I would believe that would be the latter, that we just want 2 separate agenda items, but not.
We
not an
absolutely
yeah.
can do that,
Okay.
yes.
And just want to weigh in from council if you were okay with separating the two meetings and delineating the two. So any objection to that? Member Nooncamp?
Definitely no objection. I support this very strongly. I really appreciate the mayor and the mayor pro tem not only making sure that we have this conversation, but in the last several meetings, making sure that the meetings are starting at 7 o'clock or as close to it as we can get so that we're really honoring the citizens who are here to speak with us. I think you guys have done a really fantastic job the last several meetings presiding, and I appreciate that. I do think we continue to see citizens. I just spoke with one recently who had said, I'm sorry, I've never been here before. I don't know what I'm doing. And they came at 6 and had to wait for over an hour to speak. And I think the more we can make it clear, accessible, easy for citizens to engage in our meetings, the better. So I do support 2 agendas.
Thank you, Member Nooncamp. Anyone else? I see there's no objection here. Perfect. I have nothing else for tonight. I'll move it on to council members' choice. Anyone want to weigh in? Mayor Pro Tem?
I do have one item to discuss, and I probably need some direction from the body on this. We are the subject of a recent core request, and I'm going to try to make my statements without disclosing anything that should not be disclosed. There are documents in that core request response that potentially could be deemed to be privileged. And there is one document in particular that is marked as privileged that I would like this body to waive privilege on. And that is our right as the body to waive privilege. And my understanding, based upon what I've heard from the city attorney, is that any one member of this body has the authority to waive privilege on a document like that. However, I would like that to be a decision of the entirety of the body. So to the extent that we may need to discuss the remainder of the details in executive session, I will move at this time to go into executive session under Colorado Revised Statutes 24-6-402 4B for a conference with our city attorney to receive legal advice on specific legal questions.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Could I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Can we please vote?
We don't have any discussion?
Actually, are we allowed to have discussion? I'm trying to think. Okay, so any discussion? Go ahead, Member Anderson.
Thank you. I think this particular reason, and I'm thankful to Mayor Pro Tem for kind of spilling it out clearly enough that we can maybe get our minds around it here, could potentially allow us to be more transparent for anyone interested in the public. So I certainly wouldn't want to participate in an executive session that would have the effect of hiding information, but I think this particular one has the potential effect of providing additional transparency and clarity. So I'm supportive of this.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Woodward.
I'm just wondering don't we have to post this? Shouldn't there be going into executive session? Shouldn't there be a 24-hour posting of that?
No, actually, we specifically researched that because we anticipated that question. Under the open meetings law, it states that we shall post an agenda when feasible, but then our rules of procedure specifically refer to statute and specifically note that executive session can be moved and held even if it's not on the agenda, because often matters arise during a meeting that could require executive session. For example, if you determine during a discussion that you need legal advice on it, it would be appropriate to go ahead and move to go into executive session at that time. There are requirements. It has to be a vote of 2/3 of those present, and it has to be a regular meeting of the governing body. But otherwise, it does not have to be pre-posted on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please vote?
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Noonencamp?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward?
Aye.
Member Wink?
Aye.
Member Woodward?
Nay.
Mayor Sierra?
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes and 1 nay, the 1 nay being Councilmember Woodward.
Perfect. I guess we will be moving into executive session, and I think Member Wink will be back here we'll be back at the conclusion of the executive session, so. Thank you.
Actually, Mayor, do you want to read the script into the record?
All right. Present at the executive session are the following persons: Mayor Othaniel Sierra, Mayor Pro Tem Stephen Ward, Council Members Rita Russell, Joe Anderson, Chelsea Noonenkamp, and Jim Woodward, City Manager Sean Lewis, and City Attorney Tamara Niles. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, right in here.
All right, everyone, we are back. The time is now 9:43 and the executive session has been concluded. Present at the executive session were the following persons: Mayor Othaniel Sierra, Mayor Pro Tem Steve Ward, Councilmember Rita Russell, Joe Anderson, Chelsea Newton-Camp, and Jim Woodward, City Manager Sean Lewis, City Attorney Tamara Niles. I move to close this executive session. May I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Anderson. For the record, if any person who can we please vote? Sorry.
Member Anderson?
Aye.
Member Noonan-Camp?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ward?
Aye.
Member Wink? Oh, sorry. Member Woodward?
Aye.
Mayor Sierra?
Aye.
Let the record show 6 ayes.
Perfect. For the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into the executive session occurred during the executive session, or that any improper action occurred during the executive session in violation of the open meetings law, I would ask that you state your concerns for the record. Seeing none, thank you, everyone. Mayor Pro Tem, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. So just one other item to report, which is I attended a block party on the 4500 block of Calumet in District 4 on Saturday night. The neighbors were delighted to have the block party trailer, and it was a wonderful gathering of some neighbors on that block. I got to meet some Englewood residents, new and old, from my district, and they really appreciated the supplies and the sponsorship of the event. And I'm looking forward to attending more of those tomorrow night at National Night Out.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else have anything for tonight? Member Anderson?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to see on the 5G issue, I know this has been tough and there's not very little we could do. And as I've done I had the idea that occurred to me is to see if we could communicate with our legislators to see if we could pass a resolution to address the local control issues. And I understand that some of this is dependent on the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996 and some rulemaking from the FCC. And I was wondering if we had an appetite from council to pass a resolution regarding specifically addressing our federal representatives, potentially state representatives if appropriate, but I think most of this goes back to the federal level, just to ask them to reconsider ask them to propose making amendments to the Federal Telecommunications Act to bring back local control, specifically for some of the telecommunications stuff, so that we have the authority in the, potentially in the future. I don't know how far something like this will get, but I think that this is the path forward if we were going to actually see some change on this. So I wanted to see if council was interested in doing that.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Russell?
I would be interested in doing that, but also I think one thing that this council might do as a body is perhaps ask AT&T to reconsider a different location for that specific one, because I believe if, as a body, we interceded for them, it might help there too, but we would have to come up with a proposal of perhaps a different place. So I'm in favor of doing what you suggest, Member Anderson, but I'm also interested in doing the other piece too.
Thank you, Member Russell. Member Woodward?
When we were, or when some of us attended CML and talking with some of the vendors, they have lots of vendors there, and some of them were talking about buying our street lights in the city, and then being able to lease them for 5G towers. Now that, I don't know if that makes any difference, but it puts them up higher in the sky. I don't know. I don't understand the technology of all that, but I'm wondering about that. We would have more control with that, I think, if I understand the analysis that we got by email.
So Member Wu, are you a no to the resolution, but yes to finding other avenues? Like what you heard at CML regarding?
Oh, as far as, I'm a yes to
Yes to looking at a resolution.
yeah.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Member Anderson, for bringing this forward. I'm excited to hear some actual solutions to the problem that we're having coming forward. I would suggest that we might also consider engaging the CML lobbying group or lobbyists to see if there's appetite. Local control is a big thing, and it's a big thing that I support. So I would like to see us take some action. I was understanding that we were potentially going to have a study session coming up on this particular topic as well. Perhaps this is something that we can cover during that study session.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Member Noonekamp.
Yeah, that would actually be my preference. I understand the motivation here, and I may agree ultimately with it, but before we ask for this control, I would like to get a better handle of what exactly we're asking for and what the ramifications of that might mean for the city. Do we want full telecommunications local control? And I would feel more comfortable after this, having a study session first, getting some more information, closing some of my own knowledge gap on this, and understanding from both the city attorney and the expert that we're bringing in for that study session, what are our options here? Is there a way we can ask for a different site? I think there's probably consensus about seeing what we can do. And hearing tonight from Mr. Kell-Clark that the project still has some other steps to go through before it's finalized, I'd like to hear from the experts before I make a decision about how we communicate externally on this.
Thank you, Member Noonekamp. And City Attorney Niles, do we have that scheduled for next Monday?
Yes, it is next Monday.
Okay, good to hear. I'll weigh in. I agree with Member Noonekamp. I want to look at it, but I also want to get an understanding. I think Mr. Kell-Clark stated that Boulder put together some plan where they're using public facilities or something like that. So I'd like to get an understanding of what Boulder's doing differently that we're not doing that may potentially limit the intrusion that some of our neighbors are having. So I'd like to get a better understanding of that. Maybe we could cover that next Monday night as well. Anyone else want to weigh in? And Member Anderson, the floor's still yours if you have anything else.
Nothing else. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on council member's choice? Seeing none, I'll move it over to city manager's choice.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of items. As was mentioned earlier, we do have National Night Out on Tuesday night, tomorrow night. And so if you weren't able to get your neighborhood registered, we would be glad to put you on the list for next year. But we do have more neighborhood night out gatherings than we've had in the last couple of years. And so we're excited about that. And we'll be having members of the police department right around with three of you that have asked for that tomorrow night. Let us know if you would like to do that as well. So we appreciate all the good work from the police department, community relations specialist Crystal Essman, as well as Madeline Hinkfus in communications for that. We also just wanted to give you some good news. We have, thanks to the good work of our sustainability coordinator, Melissa England, we have received approval from the state it's the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment on our letter of intent to submit for a composting program. You may remember having a number of members of the public come to council and talk about that. We did receive word last week that we were approved to proceed with an application for that program. So it'd be biannual education, outreach for residents in 2023. And so now we start the good work of the final grant application, which is due at the end of August. And then we also wanted to mention that we are once again offering hazardous waste drop-off days for residents on Saturday, September 10th and September 17th. Member Russell, I know you and I talked about this and I hadn't gotten back to you. And so it's good that a week later we find out we've got this on the calendar. that's any kind of hazardous waste that you may have that needs to be disposed of. So, and we posted that to the website as well. And then last but not least, process for canceling or postponing on the 4th of July. I know we had a lot of questions about that. We have gotten some good news in the last 2 weeks that our partners at South Suburban, even though they now have turf, artificial turf on almost all of their fields there on the north side of Bellevue at Cornerstone, they had originally said, we're no longer allowing you to use that. And they're saying that we can actually use enough of that park that they think that they can manage the crowd in terms of what people can and can't bring in and put on those fields. But we do want to just check in to see if you were wanting an official, like a study session on when do we postpone, et cetera. You know, most of our events, I think we make administrative decisions, but that one is a very large public event and the council has been very interested in. So we just want to make sure that we're fulfilling your request from last month about when and how we do that.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. Yeah, I like to weigh in. I definitely think we need to have another study session or at least discuss way ahead of time whether or not we're going to move forward with the July 4th fireworks. Anyone see anything different or feel differently about that? Study session, discussion? Member Russell.
So are we talking about not moving forward with the 4th of July next year?
No, I think I guess the way that I'm understanding is that we've always made the decision like a month before the 4th of July or 2 months before the 4th of July. I like the suggestion, I can't remember if it was you, Member Anderson, that we should probably have something at the beginning of January where we just state we're gonna move forward with the 4th of July. The only reason why we would postpone it was the week of it is a high fire danger, something along those lines. But we would want to hear from all the council before making that decision on how we want to move forward with the 4th of July.
Well, you know, I think in the past, the 4th of July has always been on the schedule. And then we decide we're not going to do it because it's a huge event.
Right.
And it takes a lot of planning. I mean, a lot of that planning needs to go on a year in advance because they have to order fireworks and all of that. So I'm not into studying that. I think we put it back on the agenda and then we decide if, you know, conditions are such that we're not having it.
And the more I talked about it, the more I think what you're stating makes a lot more sense, Member Russell. Member Anderson.
I agree in principle with Member Russell that, you know, that this is something we should move forward with. However, what I want to do is all agree ahead of time that we're not going to change events 30 days ahead of time. And so I think we should have a study session or maybe it doesn't need to be a study session. Maybe we could just do it here now, you know, it could be very simple, but yes, you know, that we can all, or enough of us say, yes, we're going to go forward with the fireworks and only cancel them at the last minute if absolutely necessary for the safety of the city. That's what I want out of that study session.
Thank you, Member Anderson. Member Noonenkamp.
I agree with Member Russell. I think we obviously plan on having the fireworks. It's an Englewood staple that I think everyone wants to see. I hear what Member Anderson is saying, and I think that it was a really tough decision this year because obviously I would have preferred to have more time. We were 30 days out. I think the decision for me was in the likelihood of having no fireworks or then having nothing, right? So no fireworks meant no celebration, no activities for families, nothing in the park, nothing in the city. And I think we needed time, that 30 days out, to make that decision. So to pivot, right? Because otherwise we would have had nothing and we could have lost our money. So I think that's where that came from. But I don't see the need to make a policy. I think these weather patterns are changing, things are happening. I don't want to bind us into a decision when things could look different next year. But I think we should always plan on having the fireworks unless there's some extenuating circumstances.
Thank you, Member Noonenkamp. Anyone else want to weigh in? Yeah. Member Woodward.
Yeah, I would agree with Member Noonenkamp on that. I don't know. I think and with Member Russell, I think we should make, our policy is we're having the 4th of July. And I mean, it's going to have to be a really big emergency or whatever for me to vote 30 days prior to and say, no, let's cancel fireworks. And, you know, I did it thinking that it was with regard to safety. Well, I'm not so sure it was any safer not having fireworks while we had them going all over by citizens all over the city. And I think back to the pandemic year in 2020, when they you know, you see these photos from the air of the whole city, and there's fireworks everywhere. More fireworks than you've ever seen before. And that's what, so I don't know, I'm forward to planning on having fireworks.
Thank you, Member Woodward. Anyone else? I think there's consensus just to move forward with the fireworks and then decide. Well, Member Anderson.
Well, maybe I'm getting a little confused about this discussion because it sounded like we want to plan on having the fireworks, but also we want to plan to cancel them early enough. And I am firmly in the camp that it's either the fireworks or nothing. If we have to cancel it at the last minute, I don't want to put it on staff like we did this year to plan an event 30 days out or even 60 days out that should be planned, you know, 8 or 9 months out or something like that. And I think people want fireworks on the 4th of July. I don't know what attendance was like. I wasn't there. I was at fireworks in Palmer Lake with my kids because my kids want to see fireworks on the 4th of July. So I think we should plan on doing the fireworks and only cancel them at the last minute. If there's enough council that thinks we should cancel them earlier, then we should cancel them, you know, now. Like really, like if there are 4 of you that want to cancel the fireworks, we should cancel them now because there's no other time to know whether or not it's going to be dry enough until you get to the day of, you know, really the day of, because you could get a thunderstorm the night before or even in the morning that gets everything wet. So let's either cancel them now or do them.
Member Russell?
I just would like to say right quick that the gentleman that came from the junior JCs that explained how the process works, they know how to be really safe and even in dry conditions. So I think it's something that we should move forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Russell. Anyone else want to weigh in? City Manager, do you have direction?
Yes, and I do want to clarify that we're moving full force ahead with the fireworks show. That was not ever in question. It was a matter of when we had the discussion, there were council members who said, we really need a process for how to do this better instead of trying to make this a last minute decision. So I think I've got direction that essentially if we have to cancel, that it may be last minute, but we're not going to try to scramble and do an alternate event. And we'll just be at the direction of council on that. But I assure you, we're moving full force ahead with a fireworks event.
Thank you, City Manager Lewis. Anything else? All right, seeing none, we are now adjourned. It's 10 p.m. See some of you tomorrow. If not, I'll see you on Monday. Have a good night.